Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. The chairman of the board, Mr. David Reed, is here today. Hello, Mr. David Reed.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I am fabulous. You know, yesterday I was
Wait a minute,
there.
that hair's looking pretty good. What you did? What would you have something special going on today?
Well, no, I just, it was time for me to go to Kimball and to get my usual cut. Kimball does a fabulous job with my hair.
I'm jealous.
Well, maybe you should go see Kimball. Maybe he'll help you out.
He can't
Then
help,
again,
he can't help what's not there.
I was going to say, I don't know if even Kimball can work his magic on you, but maybe he could with you having no hair. If you tried to grow hair, what would happen?
Oh, it would grow everywhere except the parts I want it to grow. Like it grows wild everywhere I don't want it to grow. I can't cultivate it where it needs to be.
So where does it grow? Like on the sides and around?
Oh yeah,
or?
The typical male pattern baldness.
I'm sure Kimball could help you. Probably not much, but he could try. So yesterday, I was thinking about this week. I don't know about you guys. It was Sunday. And I was thinking about the week ahead. And I was like, man, I think I'm working every day this week. Monday through Friday, right here on 102.5 The Game. And not to say that working every day during the week is not something that I can do. It's just late July usually doesn't happen. When I'm 5 days locked in late June, early July, before the Titans hit training camp, it doesn't happen that often. And so I was sitting there thinking, wait a minute. Why am I not, again, not to sound lazy, but my son was born on a Wednesday and I was back at work on Monday. So it's not as if like I don't put in the hours, but I'm like, why haven't I? And then I remembered, because the Predators are picking 5th in the draft on Friday night. So welcome to the biggest week in the Nashville Predators future. You know, some people say, welcome to the biggest week in the history of I'm not saying that. But welcome to the biggest week in the future of the Nashville Predators. And it is not just the biggest week in the future of the Nashville Predators because it's this week and the next week will be, no. It's the biggest week because on Friday, the Predators will be on the clock with the 5th pick and there will be centers aplenty to choose from that will be on the board. And there will also be some goal-scoring wingers that they can pick from. And they also have 2 other first-round picks at 23 and 26. 23 was acquired for Tanner Jeannot. 26 was acquired in that Yaroslav Askarov trade. But again, those aren't as important as the 5th overall pick in the draft. And I will say this, I was bummed out, as I'm sure many of you were bummed out on the night of the draft lottery. But at the end of the day, the Predators will have their choice between one of these guys, at least one of the following, not all of these guys, but they'll at least have a pick from this bushel. James Higgins, Brady Martin, Porter Martone, Anton Frundell, Jake O'Brien, Roger McQueen, and Caleb Denoyer. I will enjoy saying that. 2 of those guys will probably be gone by the time the Predators pick at 5. So that 7-player list is really down to a total of 5 different guys that they have the option to choose from. And that said, I don't know enough about these guys. This week, I'm going to do a lot of homework. When I was on vacation last month, Scott Wheeler, who is the lead draft analyst for The Athletic, was on with the midday show. And I went back this morning. I had Ian this morning send me that Scott Wheeler interview from the beginning of May because I wanted to hear what he had to say about the prospects. I've been reading about the prospects. I am fascinated when it comes to the prospects about who the Predators are going to pick, because even though I can't really tell you that much other than heights and weights and things that certain people have said about Caleb Denoyer or Jake O'Brien or Porter Martone or whatever, the Predators absolutely, positively have to nail this 5th overall pick. No ifs, ands, or buts. We can't look back on this draft and say, Well, it was the ping pong balls that screwed them. We can't do that. Whomever they pick has to be the number one center on the Nashville Predators 7 years from now. That doesn't mean that we have to wait 7 years for that guy to become the number one center on the Predators. But I am saying that 7 years from today, that guy must absolutely be the number one center on the Nashville Predators. That is, unless they pick Porter Martone, who's a winger. Whomever they pick has to be the centerpiece of the rebuild that began in 2023 when David Poile traded Nino Niederreiter to the Jets, which signaled that finally the Predators were waving the white flag. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I was thinking about kind of the last run with the Predators. And we all know that they went to 7 games in 2016 in the second round with San Jose. They went to the Cup final in 17. They won the President's Trophy in 18. They won the division in 19. They shipped out Subban and brought in Matt Duchene. And then they fired Laviolette and they lost in the bubble. But they said, oh, we're going to try to rebuild this thing on the fly. And then they lost in the first round of the playoffs in 21. They got swept in 22. But they said, no, we're right there. And by the time we got to about 2020, 2021, 2022, everybody was like, all right, it's time to give up the charade. That 17 thing is over. I remember Floyd saying, this is how far back it goes, saying that 2017 run, that was magic. And to bank anything on 2017, I mean, that's just not happening. And finally, before the deadline in 23, David Poile waved the white flag and it was time to rebuild. And at that point, we all knew, like, hey, this may get a little rough, but we were kind of in favor of it. Now, I didn't expect the Predators to make the playoffs 2 years ago, and I certainly didn't expect them to stink this past year. But I knew, and so did you, that the Predators needed stars. And while there are several ways to acquire stars in the NHL, the only real way, unless you've just got everything going for you at just the right time, is to stink. That's just how it is. You want to know how Florida got so good? How they got Sasha Barkov? How they got Aaron Ekblad? They sucked. You want to know how Edmonton got Draisaitl and McDavid? They sucked. So here's your chance. Here's your chance. This fan base is not going to allow for another bad season where the Predators are picking within the top 5. I mean, there are people now who 2 years into this, when the general manager, again, started a rebuild, I mean, they want to fire him now because last year was bad. I feel like Barry Trotz, if this team ends up picking top 5 next year, I feel like Barry Trotz will be out of a job. Even if that's not what I would do if I owned the team. And even though that player that they picked on, that they will pick on Friday night, might not be with the NHL club this coming season, or at least consistently be with the NHL club, they have to nail it. That has to be a first-line center. That has to be an all-star. That has to be a big boy forward. I do not believe, and again, I have no sourcing on this. I don't know Bill Haslam. I have no sourcing on this about how he would run this team, but I'm just telling you, I'm not sure Barry Trotz will be around if they're picking in the top 5 this upcoming season. I also think, as bad as it was at times last year, I think their roster has too many solid players. Even though they're old pawpaws, they have too many good players to be this bad next year. So I don't think Barry Trotz is going to get another top 5 pick. So this is the week. This is the week that will determine the Predators' fate. Not in the immediate future, but long term. And while I don't really know personally the difference between all of these guys, again, Hagens and Martin and Martone and Frundell and O'Brien and McQueen and Denoyer, etc., I'm just going to tell you, they better get it right. They better get it right. If this is a trade back, for instance, Puck Daddy brought up Greg Wyshynski, brought up the idea that the Islanders might try to trade back to go get James Higgins and Matthew Schaefer in this year's draft. Good luck to them, but that they may try that. If that's the case and the Predators trade that spot, again, they better get it right. That's the reality of the situation. They better get it right. And so while, again, June, and there's a lot of radio hosts out there that I think get kind of lazy when it comes to this time of year. They'll sit there and say, well, I mean, it's June, and what are we going to talk about? And what are we going to – anything that, again, if you really care about the Predators and you were in favor of giving up on the constant chase with bull crap like all we have to do, Jared, is get into the playoffs and then anything is possible. Once you gave up on that and you knew this team had to rebuild at the end of the David Poile run, this is the most important week of the year for the Nashville Predators. Because even if they're better this upcoming season, and I expect them to be better this upcoming season, even if they're better, they're not going to beat Edmonton, okay? They're not going to beat Dallas. They're not going to beat Colorado. They're not going to beat Vegas. They're not going to beat Winnipeg. They're not going to beat those teams in the Western Conference. They're not going to be that good, even if they are better than they were last year, even if they make the playoffs. It's going to be like 2 years ago where they're a first-round team. But the reason I say this and the reason I bring this up is because, again, you may care more about the games you actually watch. You may care more about the games you buy tickets to. You may get more excited when the players hit the ice for training camp. You may not care so much about a 17-year-old Scandinavian. But I am here to tell you, Friday is going to determine the fate of the Predators. So I'm going to tell you right now, here's your chance. 615-737-1025 is the phone number, 615-737-1025. We will be all in this week as far as draft week is concerned. I want to make sure I can say this for certainty. Just want to make sure. Hold on. I'm trying to make sure that I don't get anything all screwed up here and say something before I'm supposed to say it. I'll just put it to you like this. I think it is very likely that we will have Barry Trotz on this program this week. And we are not going to hold back. You know this about this program. Again, I know, Joe Rexroad thinks that I'm a big Trotz homer and all that. We got to ask it about if this team stinks this year, you getting fired. We'll ask it. We'll ask the questions about the current roster, but we'll also ask about these guys because these guys, to me, are more important than anything else they may do. 615-737-1025. That's how we're starting today. 615-737-1025. So I heard Robbie Stanley say something this morning that I understand where he's coming from. I get it. But I just don't think from a priority standpoint that it really matters. I think it will matter to some of you. But again, from a priority standpoint, I don't think it should. We'll get to that coming up next. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. It's Stillman & Company, 1025, 106 for the King.
how confident should he be that those players, among others, can indeed be that next generation?
I think Barry Trotz should have a lot of confidence in the fact that he's got a number of NHL players and solid, good NHL players in the pool. I think Tanner Mollendike's going to be a top 4 defenseman in the NHL. Top 4 defensemen in the NHL nowadays make $6-7 million bucks, and I think that's what he's capable of getting to. I look at David Edstrom as a potential middle 6C. I look at Matthew Wood as a potential top 9 scoring winger. Matthew has to work on his pace of play and his skating. That's always been the concern with Wood. But as far as the ability to shoot it on the power play and the skill for a 6'4" player, that's all there for Matt Wood. Then you go to Fedor Svechkov, who they had this year, and Zachary Leroux, who started to make a dent on the NHL roster, and even guys like Joakim Kemmel, who are coming, and Teddy Stiga, who I mentioned. And there's a lot of guys who should be good players, who should be top 9 players or top 6 defensemen. They still are missing that true premium prospect, though. You look around the league, they don't have, say, an Ivan Demidov like the Montreal Canadiens do. They don't have a Sam Dickinson like the San Jose Sharks do, or a Will Smith or a Macklin Celebrini like the San Jose Sharks do. They don't have an Artyom Levshunov like the Chicago Blackhawks do, or a Zeev Boyum like the Minnesota Wild do. So they're missing that true star prospect still, but very, very deep group, strong group of young players. They're going to help sort of insulate the forward group, especially for the Preds moving forward. But that's why a player like Higgins, I think, is so important that they land him.
There you go. That was Scott Wheeler of The Athletic, their kind of prospect guru, saying, hey, the Predators have a great prospect pool, but they don't have that high-end player. Well, they have the shot on Friday night to get him, and it should be noted, Adam Vingan tells me that DVD is going to have Scott Wheeler from The Athletic on their show Wednesday. Also, it is confirmed Barry Trotz will be on the program tomorrow, and we will be live at Bridgestone Arena, and we will have a sit-down with Barry Trotz ahead of the draft, ahead of free agency, ahead of all of it. So be listening for that. So I heard Robbie Stanley say something on the program this morning that I was a little not peeved by, because I understand what he was doing, but I think it underscores the importance of how big Friday night is. And I heard Robbie say, let's talk about the moves the Predators may make this offseason for the NHL team. I've got draft thoughts with the first round coming up on Friday night, but we'll do that later in the week. And then they talked about, well, what about getting Johnny Joe? Well, he's a left shot. We need a right shot. Well, what about, Sammy Samerson, whatever. And I got to tell you, what the Predators do this offseason for the NHL roster on the scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being what the Titans did with the first overall pick level of importance, I think it's like a 4 to me, a 4 out of 10. And that may be putting it kindly. And you can't tell me I don't have skin in the game. I'm a season ticket holder. So I will be going to the games next year. But I'm thinking big picture. How they do next year. Burnett's on the hot seat. Yossi's coming back from this POTS diagnosis. Saros, I think, stinks and is overrated. All those things. Stamkos, Marchessault, Brady Shea, are they going to get any better this upcoming season? Are they going to compete to make a playoff spot? Are they going to surprise people and finally gel and come together and be what we thought they were going to be? Again, on a scale of 1 to 10, that's kind of a 5 for me. Which 5 doesn't mean it's not important. It just isn't the golden goose. Who they draft on Friday night and that they get it right. And again, they're not just picking at number 5. They're picking at 5, they're picking at 23, and they're picking at 26. That is a 10 out of 10 for me. And I know that there is a chance that guy that they draft may not play in the NHL next season. I know there's a really legitimate chance. If it's the Higgins kid that they take number 5 overall, and Higgins before the start of the season was considered to be the number 1 prospect and the number 1 guy and all of a sudden Schaefer had a great year. Misa had a great year. Hagens apparently didn't have a great year at Boston College. And now he's starting to slip because he's 5'10", 5'11-ish. And all the other guys are 6'1", 6'2". And even though Sidney Crosby was 5'11", again, everybody wants that McDavid. That just Goliath on the ice. Well, I'll tell you, you're picking fifth. You ain't going to get McDavid. But there is a real shot that if they pick Hagens, that he goes back to Boston College this year. So you wouldn't even see Hagens until April. And the other two guys at 23 and 26, if they stay at 23 and they stay at 26 and that's where they end up picking, the other guys are probably more likely to not play in the NHL this year. And I get it. But again, who they pick on Friday night is more important to me than how they do this season. The moves they may make. Well, they need a right shot defenseman, and Rasmus Anderson is out there from Calgary, and he wants a new deal, and he's a right shot defenseman. So could the Predators use one of their future picks because they got so many picks? Could they use one of those? Could they trade a couple of prospects? Could they get Brady Shea? And I don't know who's on Brady Shea's no trade list, but could they get Brady Shea to waive it and go 1-for-1 defenseman of, hey, you get cost control for the next 7 years with Brady Shea. We get Rasmus Anderson for 1 year to play on the right side next to Yossi. Like, that's great. But that's just not that big of a deal to me. Because, again, no matter what this team does, they can make the playoffs next year. No matter what they do, they cannot win the cup. If they draft the next Matthew Tkachuk, they can win the cup. If they do that 6 years from now, 7 years from now, they can win the cup. And so that's why Friday night is the cherry for me. And all the other stuff, it doesn't really compete. I don't care. Whatever. But Friday night's got juice. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025 here on the program. And again, our phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Scott is going to kick us off today. Scott, thank you for calling. Thank you for waiting. You go ahead.
Yeah, how are you doing, Jared?
Good.
Good. So you were just addressing kind of what I wanted to ask you about, and I'm totally asking this respectfully, but I'm just curious, when you say they've got to knock this out of the park, they've got to get this right on Friday night, outside of an NBA draft or an NFL draft where those players play immediately, in the Major League Baseball and National Hockey League, how do you know if you've got it right when for a year, 2, 3, you may not even see these guys? How will you know that they've got it right, and when would you be able to make that assessment?
Let me ask you this question, Scott. Let me ask you this. When do you think you'd be able to know if you knocked it out of the park?
Well, I don't know, because so many players in the National Hockey League, they may be a fantastic first rounder, but they may spend 3 years playing in college or in somewhere else, and by then you've let go of your coach and your general manager. And so I don't know. I'm asking you, how would you know that they've nailed it?
You'll know in 3, 4, 5 years. Thank you for your call, Scott. That's when you'll know. You'll know in 3 or 4 years. Like, I know you want the answer today. It doesn't work that way in the NHL. Bill Zito, and I'm not going to say he completely built the Florida Panthers, because Barkov was there and Ekblad was there and Bobrovsky was there when he got there. But Bill Zito just won his second cup. He has put together a team that has been to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals. And look, I mean, anybody can beat them. They went to 7 games with the Maple Leafs last year. And so I'm going to argue that it's probably more likely than not that they don't repeat. But if they go for a 3-peat next year, they're a dynasty. It wasn't like in 2020, everybody knew, oh, Bill Zito, this is the best general manager ever. They didn't know that in 2021. Fired the coach. People said they will regret firing Andrew Burnett in 2022. They made the trade for Tkachuk in 23. They almost missed the playoffs. They had the same amount of points as that crappy John Hines waving the white flag Predators team. You are not going to know right away. And I know you want to know right away. I'd love to know right away, too. You're not going to know right away on Cam Ward. That's the thing I keep trying to tell you guys about Sam Darnold. You don't know right away unless it's Manning. And I know Manning had a tough rookie year, but you knew Manning was just great. Unless it's that. Jaden Daniels is the exception to the rule. Even Connor Bedard. This guy was supposed to be the greatest player since sliced bread coming out of the draft. Bedard's 2 years in. The Blackhawks still suck. You'll know in 3 or 4 years. But they better get it right on Friday night, and we'll know in 3 or 4 years. 615-737-1025. More your phone, 615-737-1025, which is our phone number. If you want to weigh in, 615-737-1025 here on the program. The Predators did make a trade last week for Eric Holla, and I think most of you kind of missed the point as to why they did it. I will tell you why they did it. Because I understand it. Again, I'm not that worked up one way or another, but I understand what they did. So we'll get to that next. Stillman and Company. Again, the draft Friday night, right here, 102.5, 106 through the game. The Predators with 3 picks. 3 of them. 3 picks inside the first round. This week's Nationals best deal is Red's Hot Chicken. Red's Hot Chicken on West End is bringing the heat. Don't miss their hot chicken and waffles or the mac and cheese crunch wrap. Holy crap, that sounds delicious. Grab a $30 gift card now for only $15 while supplies last at thegamenashville.com/deals.
the minor gripe that I have with the Eric Halla trade is that the Predators should not be giving up assets for bad players. Now, a 4th-round pick, a minor league defenseman, in the grand scheme, not a huge deal. But it's sort of the principle of the matter for me. The Devils were looking to get rid of Eric Halla. They did not want Eric Halla anymore. They wanted to free up the cap space. They should have been giving the Predators something to take Eric Halla, not vice versa. But again, a minor gripe. But I'm just uncertain about the direction of this franchise right now.
There you go. That was Adam Vingan the other day talking about the Eric Halla trade. I don't get it. I don't understand. And I hear you on that, because Predators fans were pissed. You know, when the Halla trade came down the pipe, we were on the air on Wednesday when the Halla news came down the pipe, and people were texting the text like, Jared, what is your take on Eric Halla? Jared, how can Barry Trotz be trading for Eric Halla? And I just want to address this because, again, I've said I don't care so much about what they do for next season as much as I care about what they do for the big picture, what they do on Friday night with the 5th pick. But here is what matters. What matters is not whether or not this team makes the playoffs next year and gets 3 home dates in the building against Winnipeg and gets knocked out in 6 games. And at the end of the year, they raise their sticks to the fans and they move on. That's not what next year's about. To me, next year is about how many of these guys, when this team gets good again, this team won't be bad forever. When this team gets good again, how many of these guys are going to be a part of the solution? How many young guys are going to be a part of the big picture? And I've always said, for every 5 prospects you bring up or draft, you're likely to hit on 1 or maybe 2 of them for every 5. And so, for instance, this past year, the young guys that they had on this team that they were counting on or they were building around were Luke Evangelista, didn't have a good year. Fedor Svechkov had a so-so year. Zachary Leroux kind of looks like a bottom 6, really a 4th-line player. Again, they used a 1st-round pick on him, which I'm not totally enamored with, but that's reality. And then all these guys that played defense, whether it was Delgazzo, who needs a new contract, or Willsby, or whomever, Stasny, that they called up, Blankenberg, whomever. They tried out Justin Barron. He sucks. And then Evangelista, who had a terrible season. Out of that group, 1 or 2 guys, 5 years from now, 6 years from now, when it is expected that David Edstrom will be on this team, that Joachim Kimmel will be on this team, that Matthew Wood will be on this team, that Tanner Mullendijk will be on this team, that Igor Surin will be on this team, that Teddy Stiga will be on this team. 5 years from now, 1 of those guys that played this year, maybe 2, will be on the team. We'll just have to see. And again, of that list of guys I just mentioned, Wood and Mullendijk and Kimmel and Stiga and Surin and Edstrom and Schaefer, and 1 or 2 of those guys is going to make it. And the rest will be crap. That's just reality when it comes to prospects. The reason they made the Eric Halla trade. Now, again, the Jeremy Hansel, the kid they traded to him, that's a nothing. And a 4th-round pick in the NHL. Again, I'm more in favor of crop dusting the draft and just picking as many guys as possible and then seeing who ends up being good and who's not. But a 4th-round pick really isn't that big of a deal to me. A 2nd-round pick is. A 4th-round pick really is not. But the reason they brought in Eric Halla is because I believe that they felt like last year there were too many opportunities where a young guy, perhaps Fedor Svechkov, maybe somebody else, but a young guy would be put into a defensive zone situation. And Andrew Burnett didn't necessarily want to put the young guys in defensive zone situations. Again, O'Reilly's not going to play a bottom 6 forward role. It's not going to happen. You knew he wasn't going to put Tommy Novak on the ice in a defensive zone situation. But if you've got a young center who's not great in his own end, you can't put him on the ice in D-zone situations. What are you going to do? If he can't win the draw in a D-zone situation, well, now all of a sudden, you're immediately giving the puck to the other team and giving them an opportunity. So what do? You go get a veteran who doesn't really cost you anything to bring in, and you stick him in your bottom six, and he's a guy who's familiar with how it goes down around here, and he's a guy who, I believe, Andrew Burnett's been around in the past, and he plays on the bottom six, and so now there's a defensive draw for Fedor Svechkov, and you want to win the D-zone draw, and Eric Holla takes it, not Fedor Svechkov. And that's how you build up those kind of young players that are already here. It's a similar situation as to why I think the Titans need to go get Jonnu Smith to play tight end. Not because if Cam Ward pops, that when the Titans are competing for the Super Bowl with Cam Ward at quarterback, he's going to be throwing the ball to Jonnu Smith. I don't think he'll be throwing the ball to Jonnu Smith. I don't think he'll be throwing the ball to Calvin Ridley if he ends up popping. But you need Calvin Ridley. You need Dan Moore. You need Jonnu Smith. You need a defense that doesn't give up 30 points a game. You need those things to set Cam Ward up to improve. And that's no different for Svechkov, Evangelista, LaRue, these young bottom six forwards who they've got to get better. So the Holla trade, like, I get it. I'm not a big Holla guy, but I get it. And if you're looking at this through the lens of Eric Holla's not going to save the Predators, then you're right. But I'm telling you, they're not looking at it through the lens of Eric Holla's going to save the Predators. I'm telling you, I think they're looking through this of the lens of Eric Holla is going to play on the bottom six and give the young guys a shot to be better. LaRue, Evangelista, Svechkov, etc. 615-737-1025. Texter says, you said the fans will not tolerate another season where the Predators pick in the top 5. Can you talk about what happens if the fans decide they won't tolerate it? What can they really do to force a change? You know, it's a funny question. 2 years ago at the Super Bowl in Las Vegas, I randomly spent an entire night after the Super Bowl festivity, after Radio Row and everything. And I didn't spend the night, but I did spend the night hanging out with this one senior reporter. And this is a senior NFL reporter for one of the major journalism entities. And she said to me, she goes, you know what's crazy is all the work I've done in my career, college, being a journalism major, the internships, building up, etc. When I put out a story, the amount of work, the amount of sourcing, the amount of detail that I go into for a piece that lands, again, at a major outlet, the work that I do to put out a piece, and yet all these owners just listen to talk radio. And I laughed because it's true. I mean, again, I went to college and I worked hard and I feel like I do things responsibly on the radio, etc. But I also know that I'm just a loudmouth who's just sitting here saying, here's what I think the team should do. And you bet your fanny that the owners of teams listen to this more than they probably read long-form, incredibly researched articles. The reason I say that is you say, what do we as fans have? If the fans decide we're not going to put up with another top 5 pick, what do we as fans have to say about it? Well, the truth is you speak with your wallets. In 2018, you couldn't get a ticket. It was the hottest ticket in town. Right now, again, not to say that the Predators don't draw, because even for a bad season, they still sold a lot of tickets, and there were still a lot of people hitting me up for tickets because it's something to do in town. But you guys speak with your wallets, and they know that. You don't show up in the building. They don't renew season tickets. Those things happen. The other part of it where the fans come into play is the owners hear it. They listen to talk radio even though they say they don't. They hear your phone calls. They hear it. I know they do. So when I tell you that the fans aren't going to put up with this, Sam Presti is the general manager who just won the NBA Finals with OKC. Sam Presti's first draft pick as a general manager of the Seattle Supersonics was Kevin Durant. That's how long he's been in OKC for. Well, if you'll remember, OKC was very, very good with Durant and Harden and Westbrook, and then Durant went to Golden State, and all of a sudden they fell off the map. And we didn't even think about OKC in any regard. And Sam Presti's built it back. Do you think Sam Presti could have done that with the Knicks? Do you think Sam Presti, again, 2016, they went to Game 7. They had a 3-1 lead on Golden State. They lost to Golden State in Game 7. KD goes to Golden State the next year. We haven't, and I'm saying we as a society haven't paid attention to OKC since 2016. That was 9 years ago. You think you can just fall away for 9 years in New York, Philadelphia, LA? Of course not. Why? Because the fans won't accept it. I think that's the case around here. If this team finishes poorly next year, and again, if you want to be good, you have to suck. And this team has only sucked for 1 year. But I just believe the way things work in this town, if the Predators aren't good next year, you people are going to run them all out of town and they're going to blow it up. Even though I'm not sure that that's the right thing to do, because I want to see how these young guys that Barry Trotz has been evaluating and drafting, I want to see if they're any good or not before I fire the guy who's drafting all these guys. So that's what I think will happen. 615-737-1025 is the phone number if you want to weigh in. That's 615-737-1025 here on the program. Stillman and Company. Oh, there was a trade, by the way, in the NHL for a guy that for a long time had been mentioned around about here. And the return was not very good. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game.
we got a trade to announce.
And I'm Ducks have traded Trevor Zegras to the Philadelphia Flyers for forward Ryan Poehling, the 45th pick in this year's draft, and a 4th-round pick in next year's draft. Zegras, much maligned in Anaheim, joins his former teammate, and Jamie Drysdale plays defense for the Philadelphia Flyers. So they know each other. I'm sure there's that relationship, already there. And I'm sure they've texted and talked to each other by now. But again, Danny Briere, the GM, and trying to make some differences in that lineup. And now with head coach Rick Tocchet, has some work to do to get Zegras back to where, that expectation is.
And they got him cheap. Those are not big draft picks. Second's not bad. And projections I'm seeing on different sites here is Poehling's a fourth line center. They got him cheap. And that tells you that's all they could get around the league. Then that's a plebiscite and not a very good one in Trevor Zegras. He's 24. He's got lots of time. Going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to watching Jonathan Toews with the Jets. Now I'm interested in watching Trevor Zegras for completely different reasons with the Philadelphia Flyers.
Trevor Zegras, big trade, I guess. That was SiriusXM NHL Radio. That was their breakdown. So Anaheim finally got rid of Trevor Zegras, and I feel like Trevor Zegras is a name we've been talking about. Like, is Barry Trotz going to trade a first-round pick for Trevor Zegras? I feel like that is a name we've been talking about for a couple of years on the program of, Trotz, if he wants to take a big swing, go get Trevor Zegras. And then I saw that he got traded today. And I was actually looking up somebody else's salary cap information. I think I was looking up the Islanders because I saw a report from Greg Wyshynski that the Islanders apparently want to take Matthew Schaefer at number 1, and then they want to try to find a way to get back into the top 5 or 4 or whatever it'll be in order to get James Higgins. And the reason I bring this up is because when it comes to the Higgins thing, I'm like, all right, well, what do the Islanders have to offer me if I'm on the clock with Higgins at 5? What do the Islanders have to offer me? And it's like, well, they do have a first-round pick that they acquired last year that is Colorado's first-round pick in 2027 maybe that they could offer to try to get back into the top 5. And I'm like, no. Like, it better be good if you want to take James Higgins or whomever from me at number 5. And as I was at the Puckapedia page, I saw Trevor Zegras got traded. So, okay. And I clicked it because it was like Polar for Zegras. I have no idea who this guy he got traded for was. So he got traded for some center I've never heard of, a 2nd and a 4th. The Preds could have had Trevor Zegras if they wanted Trevor Zegras. So this tells me 2 things. Number 1, Zegras had almost no market, even though he had so much hype. Well, he had a great college career, and he was on the cover of the video game, and I don't give a rat's ass. This dude did not, I don't think he even cracked 60 points one time. Number 2, the way to build your team in this sport, if you're not picking number 1, number 2 every year, and again, let's not kid ourselves. In order to win the cup, you really do have to pick number 1 or number 2, unless you're the 2019 Blues. Everybody else has picked at some point number 1, number 2, number 3, something like that. Even Dallas picked Miro Heiskanen in number 3 in the draft. If you're going to do that, the way to do it is you've got to get a couple of studs. You got to draft them. And then you've got to take guys that other teams think is a pony, but is really a horse. And that's what the Florida Panthers have done better than probably anybody else. They've taken high-end, high picks that, again, they weren't great, like Bennett and Reinhart, and they flourished as older, more experienced players in the league. You buy low and you sell high. They traded Jonathan Huberdeau, who had his best season, for Matthew Tkachuk. But Trevor Zegras, that's not the kind, just because he was on the cover of the video game, that's not the kind of guy that you have to bring in to take a crack at. For me, I think the Predators do need to take some chances, but if you're giving up a first-round pick, to me, it's a lot more than just taking a chance. One texter said, I wish Barry Trotz was the GM of the Titans. Maybe you'd be okay with everything they did then. I don't know. If Barry Trotz went out there and made moves that I didn't like. I've been on his ass before. I've told Barry Trotz directly, don't sign the goalie. I said it. It's on the record. I ripped his ass with him on the show the day of the trade deadline when who was that slow ass? Shen. When Luke Shin got dealt for a second-round pick after they traded him and Tommy Novak and only got a fourth and Michael Bunting in return. Though I will say, Michael Bunting, I had never heard of him before. I actually kind of like Michael Bunting's game. One texter says, why didn't they trade Sissons or Michael McCarron last year? Mismanagement of the team and the roster. And that's fine because Barry Trotz can't look through this with any lens because he should have moved Sissons or McCarron or Ryan O'Reilly if he truly wants to develop or get a return. So I will say this. I thought they should have dealt O'Reilly last year. I definitely thought they should have dealt Sissons or McCarron. I don't know what was being offered, so I can't tell you. My sense of this is that they'll deal those guys this year if the team's not very good. But I don't disagree with you that I've seen enough. I've seen enough of Michael McCarron. I've seen enough of Cole Smith. And on defense, I've seen enough of these guys from Milwaukee who they all kind of seem to be the same. Like they all kind of seem to be the same kind of player. I am tired of seeing those guys. Barron, Willsby, Blankenberg. You know, the whole Spencer Stastny thing was all screwed up for one reason or another. But I am tired of seeing the same guy out there on defense, out there with Lazan and whomever else that they actually have out there. 615-737-1025 is the phone number if you want to weigh in. Game 7 of the finals. I did watch Game 7 of the finals last night. And I think most people watched Game 7 of the NBA Finals last night. And Game 7 apparently drew a very big TV rating. Congrats to OKC. But we know what the story of Game 7 was. And I do think that story is going to change how all of us look at our own teams, including football, baseball, whatever, not just basketball. I'll explain. We'll get to it next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 through the game. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. Let me say this. Congratulations to OKC on winning the NBA title. I know that it was a rather boring, team, OKC, SGA, rather boring. Even though they were, historically speaking, a very, very good team, it was a rather boring team, and it was a rather sleepy NBA Finals until we got to Game 7, and then it got juice. And the TV ratings were horrible for pretty much the entire NBA Finals, and all of a sudden you get a Game 7 in there, and with Game 7, you end up pulling a huge rating. According to Richard Deitch, the average viewers for the series netted out to 10.26 million, which is down from the 11.31 million last year. But it was bailed out by Game 7 because Game 7 pulled in 16.4 million viewers. So the NBA was saved by Game 7. But that's okay. That's what a Game 7 will do. That being said, the story of last night is not, and I mean this with all due respect, it is not the Oklahoma City Thunder, at least not to me. And I'm not one of these people that wants to take away from OKC because Tyrese Halliburton got hot, even though it looked like we were going to get a showdown between SGA and by Halliburton. And over the course of these finals, I have become a big Tyrese Halliburton fan. And when I saw Tyrese Halliburton go down last night, I thought, oh, no. And I'm not one of these people that's going to say that it takes anything away from OKC's title because I just don't believe that. That said, I think last night's game will have a massive effect on the future of the public's perception and what the public demands of their players. I.e., the calf strain, I don't think is going to be, oh, he'll be fine. Oh, he can play through it. That type of injury anymore here in the future. Again, I said this prior to Game 6 when I saw that Tyrese Halliburton was dealing with a calf strain. And I said, I am scared to death that we're going to have another Kevin Durant situation. And I didn't even know that Aaron Rodgers apparently had a calf strain prior to his Achilles tear a couple years ago with the Jets. But we all remember Kevin Durant had a calf strain, and Kevin Durant was going to try to play through it, and Kevin Durant went out there to play through it, and boom, crumbled to the ground. It was the Achilles. And so I said before Game 6, I'm scared to death. Tyrese Halliburton has a calf strain, and I'm scared to death that what's going to happen to Tyrese Halliburton is what happened to Kevin Durant. And then Halliburton went out there in Game 6, and he looked great. He was passing. He was shooting. He was driving. He was everything. And he only had to play half the game because it was such a massive blowout. And so it started to feel like this calf strain it's fine. He can tough it out. He can go out there and he can make a difference. And last night, he hits first couple of shots, and he's balling, and it looks like it's going to be a shootout between him and SGA, the way it should be. And then he just crumbles to the ground. And unlike times past, when it came to the public perception of an injury, and I get it, we're not doctors, we're not trainers, we haven't been through this. But we see a guy get injured, and if it's one that we've seen enough, baseball pitcher grabs his elbow, you know what it is. And last night, knowing that Halliburton had a calf strain and seeing Halliburton fall to the ground, we all knew. We all knew it was an Achilles. Last night, when he went down, everybody watching TV that had been following this at all knew what it was. And Mike Breen knew what it was, and Doris Burke knew what it was, and Richard Jefferson knew what it was. And then when Lisa Salter said that she talked to Tyrese Halliburton's dad, and his dad confirmed it was an Achilles, it was like, no duh. So I think that what happened last night has changed forever the way that we as sports fans view the calf strain. And let me use an example. Knock on wood. Let's say it's week 5 of the NFL season, and the Titans are surprisingly 3-1. David Reed, can you believe that? They're 3-1.
This is fantasy football we're talking about?
Sure. I
Yeah,
did see
sure.
in Madden football, apparently, the Titans have an 80 rating, and the Broncos, who they play week 1, have a 79 rating, which is absurd.
I guess we'll find
to
out
me.
week 1, won't we?
But let's just, hey, crazy things in that sport happen all the time. Let's say they're 3-1. The Titans are 3-1. And knock on wood, we hear at practice that Cam Ward strained a calf, and he's going to be questionable for the game. My reaction, if I hear Cam Ward has a calf strain, would be sit him as long as you need. Sit him. Last year, Chidobe Awuzie, he had a calf strain and he missed half the season. And I'm not going to lie to you. I sat there and said, get that old pawpaw's ass out there on the field. But you want to know why now I'm saying, hey, let's be double cautious if Cam Ward has a calf strain. Because while a calf strain seems to be a very long recovery, it sure as hell is not as long as a torn Achilles. And if Cam Ward, for instance, goes down with a torn Achilles, you are screwed. Not just this year, you're screwed for the next couple, because it's going to take him a whole year before he's ready to come back, and then he won't be the same player the year after he comes back off of the Achilles tear. So it'll really take him 2 years before he's back to normal, and that'll be year 3, year 4 of his NFL career. So the calf strain has now made its way, I think, into the American sports fans' encyclopedia of that is a serious injury. That is a dangerous injury. And I'll never forget when Mariota didn't play before the Week 18 game against the Indianapolis Colts. Winner take all, go to the playoffs, loser goes home. And I remember I felt the same way a lot of people felt, which was Steve McNair would have played. Again, what's wrong with Mariota's elbow? Chad Withrow still thinks today Mariota made a business decision to not play in that game. And for me, I thought that was a big strike against Mariota. And I was a big Mariota guy, believe it or not. And so now it's like, let's say same situation, winner take all, week 18, Cam Ward's got a calf strain. I am not going to say Cam Ward needs to get out there and play, because we now know calf strain, trying to play through it, equals Achilles. And maybe there's a chance. And I'm not saying Halliburton shouldn't have played last night, because I do understand the risk and the reward. The reward is Tyrese Halliburton goes off and you win the NBA Finals and he doesn't tear his Achilles. But the risk is he tears his Achilles, Tyrese Halliburton's out for next year. And this is a guy who was on the ascent as far as superstardom was concerned. So no disrespect to OKC, no disrespect to the game. I'm certainly not of the belief that their NBA championship doesn't count because Tyrese Halliburton got hurt, because injuries are a part of the game. But what I'll remember about the 2025 NBA Finals is just how risky playing on a calf strain can be. And how going forward, when it comes to a calf strain, I think it will change the opinion of the American sports fan. Again, there are times where a guy will sit out and we'll say, oh, he can play. Kawhi Leonard's got a broken toenail. He can play. The Washington Nationals years ago, after they drafted Steven Strasburg, they wouldn't let him pitch in the playoffs because, well, he can only throw so many innings and we want to keep his young arm fresh. And he still had to have Tommy John anyways. But we want to keep his young arm fresh. We don't want to hurt that right arm. But that wasn't like Steven Strasburg was facing an injury of, yeah, he's got some shoulder soreness. Yeah, he's got some elbow tendonitis. Yeah, he's got a forearm strain. let's go throw him out there. Okay, can you give me 3 innings? Can you give me 4 innings? That's not it. He was fine, and people were like, well, what are you doing shelving him? I mean, isn't this to go win the World Series? But from now on, I don't think we can question anybody who doesn't play with a calf strain. Because the calf strain, again, that is a 4-week, 6-week, 8-week injury. But it's a lot better. You let that calf strain heal. It's a lot better than a torn Achilles. And now it's not just one guy. We saw it with Durant. Calf strain, he's going to try to play through it. Torn Achilles. And now we've seen it with Tyrese Halliburton. Calf strain, going to try to play through it. Torn Achilles. Joe Burrow came in here a couple of years ago, and the Titans just beat the crap out of Cincinnati. I don't know if you remember that game. The Titans had gone to Cleveland and had gotten housed, and then they were bringing in the Bengals, who had been to 2 straight AFC title games, and the Titans just beat the crap out of them. And Joe Burrow did not move off the spot because he had suffered a calf strain in training camp and was still coming back from it. And in hindsight, I think I look back at that and I'm like, what was Cincinnati thinking playing Joe Burrow coming off of a calf strain? I mean, I don't care if Joe said, I'll retire from football if you don't let me play. I'm not sure I'd let him out there with a calf strain. If Mahomes had a calf strain and it were anything but the Super Bowl, I'm not sure I'd let him play. If Lamar Jackson has a calf, he's definitely not playing because of the way Lamar plays. But I think last night's game, the big thing, I think it changes how we now going forward view the calf strain. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number if you want to weigh in, 615-737-1025. And I do have a theory when it comes to the calf strain now, which we'll hit on next. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 for the game.
hard. Kicks it out. Toppin. Good contest from Dort. Halliburton falls down. He looks hurt. Here comes SGA the other way. Inside, and Williams throws it down. Halliburton's hurt right away when he fell. Of course, that strained calf. He's in pain. So emotional. It's the right calf right away. He knew he was in trouble. Oh, you get in a situation like this, you're just sick to your stomach for the young man. We'll take a timeout.
There you go. That was the injury everybody heard. The Tyrese Halliburton last night popping that Achilles. And I'm just going to say this when it comes to the Achilles. I had said before Game 6, and I mean, again, you can believe it, not believe it, it doesn't matter. But I had said on Sirius XM, where we were talking, I'd say some NBA, not as much NBA as I would have expected during the finals, but the finals just weren't very popular until Game 7. But we had been talking about Tyrese Halliburton, and I had said before Game 6, I said, I'm nervous. I'm nervous after what I saw happen to Kevin Durant. And I think to myself, if Tyrese Halliburton had not played, would people have understood? You know, years ago, Garrett Cole was headed to free agency where he would sign a $300 million contract with the New York Yankees, which back then that was big for baseball. Now baseball, it's like 700, 600. Those are the big ones. But this was 6 years ago, and baseball has absolutely ballooned lately. But Garrett Cole was headed to free agency. And the Astros are playing the Nationals in Game 7 of the World Series. And they had gone to Garrett Cole and asked him, can you pitch on short rest? And he said, don't think so. And I think that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, which was, this is Game 7 of the World Series. And you're going to put your own interest ahead of the team by saying, not going to pitch when it comes to short rest. But again, everybody's entitled to their opinion and everybody's entitled to their own decisions. When it comes to Tyrese Halliburton, the NBA has a very odd culture. You know, the NFL is infinitely more popular than the NBA. The NFL gets talked about more than the NBA. I mean, I know Jason Fitz used to always tell us that at ESPN when he was there, that the digital numbers just say young people love the NBA. That young people like the NBA more than the NFL, which I think is complete and utter bullcrap. I'm not saying the digital numbers don't say that they love on Snapchat watching highlights of NBA games, but I'll tell you, I don't think young people like basketball more than they like football. Somebody get me the video game sales comparing Madden football to NBA 2K, and I guarantee you Madden wipes its ass with NBA 2K. The point being, the NFL is covered more than the NBA. It's just a fact. And yet the NFL doesn't have the same culture the NBA has, which is for some reason, everything Stephen A. Smith and Nick Wright and Colin Cowherd, and until they got exiled from the mainstream, Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp and Pat McAfee and all these people, everything they say seems to matter. I don't understand it. I mean, again, Stephen A. Smith, and I got no beef with Stephen A. I don't really know Stephen A. I mean, the times I've interacted with Stephen A., I like Stephen A. Seemed nice enough to me. But again, when it comes to Stephen A., it's like these guys are so afraid of Stephen A. Smith going on TV and talking crap about them that they just do not want to get into his rants on First Take. The first takeism of the NBA. And I know, and I hate when people do this when it comes to me, but I'm going to do this with somebody else. I know that if Tyrese Halliburton had not played in Game 6 and the Pacers had lost, or if Tyrese Halliburton did not play in Game 7 and the Pacers had lost, like let's say that he didn't play in 6 and they won, and he didn't play in 7 and they lost, there would have been a discussion on First Take about should Tyrese Halliburton have laced it up and tried to give it a go. And I don't know what Stephen A. Smith would have said. And I hate this when people do this to me, when they're like, if this happens, you're going to say that because you hate the Titans. And that's not true. A lot of the times, I don't even know how I'm going to react to these hypothetical situations. They just happen, and then I react to them. But I know there would have been a discussion on First Take. And it does feel like the way that these shows work. And again, I've never been on one, so I can't tell you exactly how it works in the meetings or anything else. Trevor would know. He'll be on the show tomorrow. But when it comes to those shows, it does kind of feel like, hey, I'm going to take this side, you take that side. If you'll notice, Jared versus Joe, when we get into sometimes we agree a lot. You know, I think sometimes Caroline will go through 2 or 3 of them, realize that we've agreed, and then she's like, well, I got to throw something that I know is going to piss Jared off or I know is going to piss Joe off and get them going. But when it comes to these shows, it does feel like when there's a discussion, it's, okay, you take the other side. I think it was Floyd that told me that when he was on NFL Live, they would sit there in the production meetings and they would say, okay, today we're going to pick who's going to win the NFC East. So who do you guys think is going to win the NFC East? And everybody around the table would say the Eagles. And then it's like, okay, well, one of you's got to change. I'm sorry. And I just know that if Tyrese Halliburton had not played in the NBA Finals, I just know that one of those guys on First Take would have said that Tyrese Halliburton's too soft, that Tyrese Halliburton put himself ahead of the team, that Tyrese Halliburton's not a winner, that Tyrese Halliburton's not a good player. All these things they would have said. And I'm just here to tell you right now, I think that's baloney. If Tyrese Halliburton had not played in Game 6 or Game 7, I would not have had a problem with it. Because again, post Durant, I know how big the calf strain is. Now, I do not believe Jason Tatum, when he popped his Achilles, I do not believe that Jason Tatum had a calf strain. And just run-of-the-mill Achilles tears happen. And it sucks. I mean, it sucks for basketball when a guy like Tatum goes down, and it sucks for basketball when a guy like Halliburton goes down. I mean, that would be like Mahomes going down. I don't want Mahomes or Josh Allen or Lamar or Burrow or Herbert or Daniels or Stroud or Stafford. I don't want any of those guys to go down. I want to watch them play. Let's play some ball. I mean, I want to, let's say the Titans were to get to the Super Bowl against the Rams in 99. And Kurt Warner tears his Achilles. And so now I don't even know who the backup was then. Because if you remember, Trent Green was supposed to be the starter that year, and he got hurt. So whoever comes in relief, and he would not have beaten the Titans. Sure, we would have still celebrated the Super Bowl like they won it fair and square, and they would have won it fair and square. But I don't want the other team to get hurt. I want, let's go, let's play ball. And yet I would not have held it against Tyrese Halliburton because I know how serious the calf strain is now. And I think that's how a lot of us feel. Matthew from Jolton says NBA 2K25 sold 7 million copies. Madden was only outsold by Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Which one is that the Kyler Murray game? So how many copies did Madden sell? If NBA 2K25 sold 7 million copies, how many copies did Madden sell? And I know that, grown-ups play video games now too. I don't really play video games. I've been playing solitaire on my phone ever since Stephen A. kind of brought that into the mainstream, and I forgot about solitaire, and I Googled solitaire, and you could just play it right there in the web browser. But as far as video games are concerned, I don't really play them. But I do wonder, how many copies did Madden 2025 sell? Because again, Jason Fitz used to always come on the show and be like, the young people like the NBA more than they like the NFL. And I think that's just complete and total bullcrap. Doesn't say how many that they sold. But apparently Madden sold over 1 million copies in the first week. Well, maybe, again, I can't believe that they were outsold by NBA 2K. The NBA's not, young people do not care about the NBA more than football. They don't. But again, Stephen A. Smith says crazy stuff about football all the time, and it never, almost never has an effect as far as how NFL players are viewed or what's said in NFL locker rooms or what's asked at the podium. But with the NBA, it's like all these players are always mad at Stephen A. Smith. And sometimes I think that forces a guy like Halliburton to want to play when it's like, I don't know if you should have played. Which is the issue there. 615-737-1025. One other NBA Finals thought from last night that I want to get to, that I'm just going to call something how I see it. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 to the game.
It was tremendous, absolutely. We look forward to an NBA Finals. A lot of people doubted that it would be this spectacular, but it exceeded expectations because the Indiana Pacers showed up and give them a lot of credit where credit is due. And there's going to be a lot of people out there that's going to question what would have happened if Halliburton hadn't gone down. That's inevitable. But you know what the answer to that question is? It's a brother by the name of SGA. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. 29 points, 12 assists, 1 turnover. Just 1 turnover in 40 minutes. This brother is something special. Only the 3rd player in history. 30 points per game during the regular season. An NBA League MVP. And obviously the MVP of the NBA Finals. You're talking about Jordan 3 times. You're talking about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You're talking about Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. That's the conversation that he is in. That's the kind of season he has had. That's the kind of season he led OKC to. And a lot of people can do nothing but stand down and congratulate them.
There you go. That was Stephen A. talking about SGA last night. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. And I remember Shea Gilgeous-Alexander at Kentucky. And I don't remember like anything tangible about SGA at Kentucky. Like other than the fact that he played there. You know, even with Devin Booker, I remember how good of a shooter he was at Kentucky. And I remember that John Calipari left him and Tyler Ulis on the bench in the Final Four, the game that they would lose to Wisconsin, because he wanted the Harrison twins out there, which I thought was stupid because he refused to play zone and didn't think that Booker and Ulis could match up with the bigger, stronger guards at Wisconsin. But I don't even remember anything about SGA at Kentucky. There's another guy on Indiana's team who doesn't play who was from Kentucky. And I'm like, I do not remember this guy on that team. So SGA is an absolute superstar. When they put, and I know there was that big thing where they asked Magic Johnson, what's a superstar? And Magic Johnson said, if you can sell out the building on the road, hey, Kobe's coming to town, we're all going to the game. My late Uncle Brad, who passed away in 2018, Uncle Brad was a die-hard Atlanta Falcons and Atlanta Hawks season ticket holder. And he told me when he got up there in age, he's like, yeah, I only go now to the games where LeBron and Kobe come. That kind of superstar. And SGA's not that. But when you put up the season that SGA had, he was an all-star. He was all-NBA first team. He was league MVP. He won the scoring title. His team won 69 games. They won the NBA Finals. He was NBA Finals MVP. As much as you can laugh about it, and Ryan Russillo and those guys laughed about it when Stephen A. said, you know, that is some Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, that is some Michael Jordan stuff. That is legitimately Michael Jordan stuff. And I'm the biggest Michael Jordan fan you will ever find. You could be a bigger, or you could be the same level of Michael Jordan fan as I am, but you're not a bigger Michael Jordan fan because you can't be a bigger Michael Jordan fan than I am. And yet, I just feel like SGA is the most boring superstar. Hey, he's the real deal now. He is a great player. And that season that he had, that was a Michael Jordan-like season. I mean, I remember Doug Collins in The Last Dance basically kind of trying to defend himself because Doug Collins got bounced for Phil after they got to the Eastern Conference Finals, and then Phil won the title. And it's kind of like, yeah, Doug Collins, he's not as good as Phil. And Doug Collins, I think, is probably thinking, I could have done the same thing. And we just needed more time with Michael and those guys to come into their prime a little bit more, and they would have been ready or something like that. But Doug Collins in The Last Dance, he's like, when I was coach, Michael was the MVP. Michael had won the scoring title. Michael was MVP of the All-Star game. And Michael was, I don't know, like, you know, something else. And when it comes to SGA, like, he is all of those things as of right now. Again, Michael was like a 12-time scoring champion and a 6-time finals MVP. So SGA's got a lot of catching up to do to get to Michael. And I'm not saying that. But as far as the individual season that Shea Gilgeous-Alexander just had, that is similar to Michael Jordan's type of seasons when he was having his run as the best superstar in maybe the history of sports. And yet, I just find the SGA thing to be so boring. He's just boring. That's just how it is. He doesn't really say anything. He's not very polarizing. Like, you can't have these LeBron James arguments that people have all the time about SGA. Now, if SGA wins some more games, like let's say the Thunder go back to back, then I think we can have some of these discussions. But as far as what the NBA really thrives off of, which is polarization and arguing, it's why Stephen A, again, is such a big deal when it comes to basketball. But even though he has equally as big of a platform for football, is not as important because, again, the football dialogue, American to American, is not about this constant arguing and bickering about who's the best and who's the greatest and who's the all that kind of stuff. Though we did get there. We started to get there with the Chiefs before they got hammered in the Super Bowl. We started to get there a little bit with the Chiefs. But it's just crazy to me that this Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I mean, he really is all that in a bag of chips. I mean, let's call it like we see it. Let's be honest. When you do the things he did this past season, it's not like there are no good players in the NBA. And he's the best player in the NBA. Unquestioned best player in the NBA. At a time, you know, when Tim Duncan was winning titles, well, he's winning it with David Robinson. Well, Kobe's in LA. And when Kobe was doing his thing, he had Shaq. And then when they broke up, Kobe wasn't as good. And then at the end of the Kobe, when he started winning titles, there was still LeBron. And so it was like, well, is LeBron better than Kobe? And not to say that there's, you know, not going to be some sort of argument when it comes to SGA. I don't think you can argue it right now. I don't think you can argue who the best basketball player on the planet is. SGA didn't have to leave Golden State. Leave OKC to go to Golden State to play with guys that had already won a title and had already won 73 games so that he could win a championship. He didn't have to force his team to go get Anthony Davis the way LeBron did. So I'm here to tell you right now, SGA, I mean, again, I do think he is all that in a bag of chips. I think he's a great player. I think that he plays the game the right way. I think he plays hard. I think he plays smart. I think he's a good passer. I think he's all those things. Like, I think he's a freaking stud. And yet at the same time, I just think he's the most boring superstar. Which, again, I'll take. If Cam Ward ends up being the most boring superstar, but he's a superstar at quarterback, I'll take it. Like, I will take it in a heartbeat. But it's just crazy that in this NBA world we live in, it feels like every star over the last however many years, it's been kind of, even if they weren't LeBron level of polarizing, there at least was, you know, some like Dirk. Dirk had some of that. Dwayne Wade had some of that. SGA, it just kind of feels like SGA's just prodding along as an absolute freaking beast. And hats off to him. Because, again, the kind of people that had the season that he just had, where you are league MVP, where you do win the scoring title, where you do win the All-Star Game MVP, where you do win the NBA Finals, and you do win the Finals MVP. Again, that is a Michael Jordan season. Like, that is a legit Michael Jordan season. So one texter says he's a huge gamer when it comes to this 2K v Madden. Says, I'm a huge gamer. 2K has a huge online community that's completely different than Madden, so it's not a good comparison. Well, don't the kids like the online stuff? I had a buddy of mine, like, my son's 6 months old, so I don't know about all this stuff yet as far as kids and their habits. But I had a buddy that told me, he's like, you know how, like, we used to, like, go outside and play? Or we'd go to, like, a friend's house and we go play? Now the kids just play video games against each other in their own living rooms, which I'm sure is going to happen to me. So I am not judging any of you. But if Fitz's theory is, oh, young people love the NBA way more than football, then wouldn't 2K have more people playing it and buying it? Because it is still, after all, a video game, which is a toy for kids, than Madden. One texter says SGA needs Anthony Edwards' personality, and then he'd be in the discussion. Why do you need a certain personality to be discussed whether or not you're good? And by the way, you know that next generational superstar where the NBA has gone since Magic and Larry got them off of tape delay for the NBA Finals. It was Larry, then it was Magic, then it was Michael, then it was Kobe, then it was LeBron. After LeBron, I don't know who's next. I think SGA may have a shot. But he probably needs to win another title and probably needs to, do another one of these. If I'm just being honest, SGA probably needs like another run in order to start to get into that discussion. He will be a lot more watched and a lot more cared about going forward now because of what he accomplished this past year. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. So another title was decided yesterday, and apparently there were some fireworks and some drama at the beginning of that game too. Got a quick thought on this. Did you see what happened to the Coastal Carolina coach? We'll do that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5. What is the game?
With Ianson, about every count is potentially a breaking ball count. He throws that curveball or the slider roughly 50% of the time.
Oh my goodness, he just threw Kevin Schnall out of the game. Wow. In the bottom of the first inning, the home plate umpire throws Kevin Schnall out of this game, and down goes an umpire who had come in to get in the middle of things. I believe, guys, this had to do what happened at the end of the top of the first with the third base coach for LSU. This seemed to stem from the first base coach. And then Schnall remarkably gets thrown out of the game. A College World Series game 2 in the bottom of the first.
Well, and I didn't even see that building, guys. Like, it's one pitch, and next thing you know, Schnall's out of the dugout, and Angel Campbell's had clearly heard enough. That thing escalated quickly.
Again, this will always come back to whatever was said. They may have just thrown another one out.
He just threw Matt Schilling out again, first base coach.
What a crap show at the College World Series yesterday. So we tried to go out on the lake yesterday. I got to tell you, LSU, Coastal Carolina, congratulations to LSU. I didn't watch. We tried to go out on the lake yesterday, and basically as soon as we got in the water, it was like dark skies overhead, and we had to take it in. And I'm sitting there in the restaurant of the marina because we were going to try to sit out, see if the storm would come, and then we looked at the radar, and it wasn't looking good. So I'm sitting there in the restaurant of the marina. And technically, I was a credentialed media member for the College World Series. Now, I didn't go, but I was credentialed through Louisville. If Louisville had gone to the championship, I would have gone. And so I was credentialed. So I got an email from the NCAA about an official statement on what went down yesterday at the College World Series. This was from Jennifer Rogers, the NCAA. Let's see, yesterday at 3:14 p.m. And so I didn't even know what had happened at this point. And it said in the bottom of the first inning, Coastal Carolina coach Kevin Schnall and first base coach Matt Schilling were ejected from the game for continued arguing about balls and strikes after being warned initially by the umpire crew. NCAA playing Rule 6.3F Note 1 states that balls, strikes, half swings, or decisions about hit-by-pitch situations are not to be argued. After a warning, any player or coach who continues to argue balls, strikes, half swings, or hit-by-pitch situations shall be ejected from the game. And then apparently that Coach Schnall is suspended for the next 2 games, blah, blah, blah. So I got that, and I'm like, whoa, there must have been some sort of drama in Omaha. Then, this morning, I was out on a walk, and I was listening to the show I used to be on in Louisville years and years ago because our sales manager at the station, Louisville, Nate Huber, is actually a high-end D1 college umpire. Like, if you were to ask Tim Corbin right now, what do you think of Nathan Huber, he'd probably have a scouting report. Because Nathan Huber does a lot of SEC, ACC, NCAA tournament games, etc. And Nathan Huber was in studio kind of breaking it down for the guys. And I had not seen up until this point what happened in the Coastal Carolina LSU game. And Nathan Huber was saying, as an expert, and Nate is not a guy who's just going to be for the brotherhood all the time, or at least I don't think that. I know Nate very well. And Nate was saying, like, hey, man, like the way it works is there's a magic word. If you say that you get tossed, we all know what it is. But balls and strikes, and I thought everybody knew this. Now, I'm a huge baseball fan, so I get it, but I thought everybody knew. If it is technically written that if you argue balls and strikes, you get the boot. Period. That gives the umpire, no matter what you say, all the leeway in the world to not let you argue balls and strikes. And the unwritten rule is, and I guess it's written here because it says after a warning, any player or coach who continues to argue balls, strikes, half swings, or hit by pitches shall be ejected from the game. I've seen this a million times in my life. There's bickering from the dugout, about a call, like, oh, you missed it, Blue, something like that. And after a while, the umpire takes the mask off and basically says, hey, that's enough. And if you keep talking after, hey, that's enough, you're gone. And that's what Nate Huber was saying this morning on the show in Louisville. So I figured that's probably what it was. And I thought, do people not know the rules? Well, then I watched what happened. Again, Coastal's coach, I thought, I understood why he got the boot. I do think this, though. When it comes to the umpiring profession, there are some umpires out there, and apparently this Angel Campos is no different. And I don't know what it is about some of these guys. Major League Baseball has them. Angel Hernandez was one of them for years. Doug Eddings, he's number 88. I mean, he's a terrible umpire, but they also have this like small penis syndrome where the second they get barked at, it's like they got to yank the mask off and they got to heave somebody out of the game. And I always view the umpire as the guy who needs to be the authority figure here, but also needs to be the de-escalator in a situation. This is the final of the College World Series. They are facing elimination. They are barking from the dugout. The coach comes out of the dugout. I think if you're the home plate umpire, you have to make sure that you've made it clear to him. And apparently it was not clear to the Coastal Carolina coach, Kevin Schnall. You've got to make it clear to him, hey, that's enough. If you say, Kevin, if you say anything more, I'm throwing you out of the game. Angel Campos didn't do that. And I actually texted Jeff Hem about Angel Campos. And I texted him because apparently he was a minor league umpire, and then he'd get called up to the majors and do some games and then go back to the minor leagues. Now he's doing college. I think you make a lot more money in college than you do in the minor leagues, even if you're a major league call. Now, you make more money in the major leagues, but you have to be a full-time major league guy. It does not sound to me, based off of what I've heard, that Angel Campos was a full-time major league guy who got sit down. I asked Jeff Hem, I said, what was his reputation as far as Angel Campos was concerned? Because, Jeff obviously calls the sounds and has done so for 10 years. And Jeff says that he does not remember him coming through the minor leagues because he might have been in the other AAA league before they reset it. So I do wonder, did he have the reputation as a quick hook guy? But again, I know the rules. If you argue balls and strikes, that's it. The other rule in the big leagues is if you throw equipment, you're out. Now, we see guys strike out and throw their hats and throw their helmets and their bats and stuff like that all the time, and they never really get in trouble. But if you take a called third strike and you throw the helmet down, you're out. And everybody knows that. I just thought that everybody knew what the rules were when it came to baseball, that technically you can't argue balls and strikes. I also thought everybody knew that this is how this works, which is after some barking, enough's enough, and the umpire says, hey, that's enough. And every now and then you get one of these a-holes like Gary Darling that'll yank the mask off, and he'll pick a fight with the pitcher and then throw the pitcher out and all that kind of stuff. Kind of felt like that's what Angel Campos was yesterday. Even though a guy I trust, even though a guy I know who does this for a living completely took Angel Campos' side, I just think in the College World Series final, and I know it's 100 degrees out there, I get it, you need to be kind of face-to-face so that he gets the message. And the one thing that some of these umpires have to realize, it's not about you, dog. It is not about you. We shouldn't even know that you exist. That's the sign of a good umpire. Is if the only time I know who you are is because before the game, they say, and our umpires today behind the plate, Field and Colbreth will be behind the plate. Paul Immel at first base. Ed Rapawano will be at third. And Terry Tata at second base. And that should be the only way that I know you exist. That's it. Now I'll see on Twitter some of these videos of guys getting thrown out of the game. And a lot of times it's either the guys we all know, Angel Hernandez, CB Buckner, Doug Eddings, although Angel has retired, thank God. Or it'll be these Johnny-come-lately newcomers that have gotten called up from AAA that, again, tiny weenies, because they just chuck people out of the game. Like there was one a couple years ago, I forget who it was, where Aaron Boone got warned. Somebody looked over to the Yankee dugout and said, "That's enough. That's enough." And the guy turned back around, the umpire did, and then he turns back to the Yankee dugout, and the camera is on the Yankees dugout. And Boone does not even open his mouth. Nobody in the dugout says anything. And the umpire hears something because it was a fan a couple of rows behind, and the umpire turns around and throws Boone out of the game, and Boone sprinted. He went nuts. Like, again, umpires, chill. It ain't about you. 615-737-1025 is the phone number, 615-737-1025. So last night, I think somebody punched a ticket to the Hall of Fame. And I'm not sure this guy could have gotten to the Hall of Fame anywhere other than OKC. I'll explain. We'll get to it next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios, and we are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. So last night, the OKC Thunder won the NBA title. Congratulations to them. Again, I told you, I think SGA, he had a Michael Jordan-like season, and this is coming from somebody who loves Michael Jordan. Reed, you love Michael Jordan. I know you do. But when you look at what SGA accomplished this year, winning the MVP, the scoring title, the finals MVP, etc., That was a Michael Jordan-like season, right?
He accomplished something that Michael Jordan accomplished.
It was a Michael Jordan-like season.
He accomplished the same thing that Michael Jordan accomplished. Did he accomplish it in the same way?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying he's Michael Jordan or anything like that.
It sounds like you're saying he's Michael Jordan. It sounds like
No.
you're agreeing. It sounds like you're agreeing with Stephen A. again, and you're saying that SGA is the next Michael Jordan.
I am not saying that.
Okay, then stop saying his name in conjunction with Michael Jordan. They accomplished the same thing. They did not accomplish it in the same way.
If he does this like 4 times, then we can start talking about him and Michael Jordan.
I don't
not
even
that
know
I
if
would
he
say
does
that
it
he's
4 times because he's playing in a weaker league.
Don't tell
it's
that to
not
Joe.
the same. Joe Rexroad, the NBA today sucks. You know it sucks. Stop stumping for whoever you're stumping for. It's not the same game. It's not the same league. It's a terrible product. The athletes are better. They're more athletic. They're fabulous, but it's not the same game.
Well, congratulations to SGA. But I think somebody yesterday punched a ticket into the Basketball Hall of Fame, which admittedly is not the hardest Hall of Fame in the world to get into, if I had to be completely frank with you. Tony Kukoc, for instance, is in the Basketball Hall of Fame. Now, I think that has more to do with their international program than it does anything else. But again, it's Tony Kukoc. But Sam Presti, the general manager of the Thunder, I think punched a ticket into the Basketball Hall of Fame. And I'm going to tell you, what he did in OKC could not have worked anywhere else in the country. And it could not have even worked here for the Tennessee Titans. And I'll tell you why. Sam Presti's first pick as general manager of the then Seattle Supersonics was Kevin Durant. That's how long ago it was. They won the lottery, and they knew they were going to either get Greg Oden or Kevin Durant. When you're picking number 2 and it's a 1-2 draft, you know, well, I'm getting the other guy. And that's what they knew. But it wasn't just that they stopped at Durant, because the next year, they didn't have the first overall pick. They drafted Russell Westbrook. The next year, they drafted James Harden. And with that group, Durant, Harden, and Westbrook, he drafted 3 Hall of Famers 3 years in a row, and they got to the finals in 2012. And then after Harden left, they couldn't come to a contract agreement. Harden leaves. That team with Durant and Westbrook, they were right there when they lost to Golden State in 2016. They were right there. The same way I keep telling people about the Maple Leafs, you were right there and you lost to a wagon in Florida, but you were right there. Does anybody know what happened to OKC after Kevin Durant left? They were completely irrelevant for 3 years. They tried with Russell Westbrook as their kind of focal star, and they acquired Paul George, and they went out and got Carmelo Anthony, but they were irrelevant for 3 years. They tried, and then they blew the team up. Goodbye, Paul George. Goodbye, Russell Westbrook. Hello, SGA. Hello, draft picks. Hello, losing. And with that, they were able to draft Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams. Give it some time in the microwave to cook. Hello, championship. That would have never, ever happened in New York or Philly or LA, where after taking a swing at it with Westbrook and George and Carmelo didn't work, and the fans and local talk radio and Stephen A. Smith would have been losing their minds and calling for Sam Presti's head. Even though Presti was the guy who was smart enough to draft Durant, smart enough to draft Russell Westbrook, smart enough to draft Harden, smart enough to draft Serge Ibaka, I guess he must have gone stupid, right? That's what they would have said if he was the general manager in Philadelphia. Not OKC, Philadelphia, they would have said, oh, he's a bum, he sucks. And that wouldn't even fly here. And you want to know why I know it wouldn't have flown here in Tennessee? Because I saw this. And so did you. When Bud Adams fired Floyd Reese, I feel like the real chance this franchise had at winning the Super Bowl got flushed down the toilet. Now, yes, I'm biased. My son's middle name is Reese. But you guys heard Floyd on the radio, and you remember the teams that he built, and there's a reason why Bill Belichick brought him in to be the number 2 in New England. You know he didn't forget how to run a team. When Floyd Reese was the general manager of the Tennessee Titans, he was smart enough to draft Steve McNair and Eddie George and Javon Curse and Derek Mason and Samari Rolle and Albert Hainsworth, etc. They built a team that went to the playoffs 4 out of 5 years, went to a Super Bowl, went to 2 AFC title games, won 2 divisions, and had 1 year the best team in all of ball. They built a defense that was so good that 2000 Ravens defense, which people compare to the 85 Bears, was actually the number 2 defense in the NFL that year because the Titans were number 1. But you know what the major difference between OKC and the Tennessee Titans is? Clay Bennett, the owner of the OKC Thunder, he was a partner with the Spurs when Sam Presti was in his 20s. And he watched the authority that then general manager R.C. Buford and then head coach Greg Popovich gave Sam Presti. They didn't just hire him because he was doing well with the Spurs. The owner of the then Supersonics saw this guy running a team, and he said, this guy knows ball. And he hired him. And after they had their success, they got to the NBA Finals. They were knocking on the door with Durant and Westbrook, and then Durant left. He didn't fire Sam Presti. He didn't fire it when it didn't work with Paul George and Carmelo Anthony because they were trying to build the team around Westbrook. They let the guy who built the team the first time build it back the second time. The Titans let Floyd Reese draft Vince Young, but they didn't let him see it through. There was a succession plan in place. McNair was on board. Vince Young was on board. Jeff Fisher was on board. Floyd Reese was on board. Bus Cook, who was the agent for both Steve McNair and Vince Young, was on board. But Bud Adams went crazy, and they locked Steve McNair out of the building, and poof, there went the succession plan. Vince Young won Rookie of the Year, and they fired Floyd. And I asked him, I said, Floyd, whatever happened to Vince Young? He was a bust. He said, all I know is when I was here, he was Rookie of the Year, and he was headed to the Pro Bowl. One time it was during a commercial break. Floyd was staring out the back window of the studio, and I said, hey, Floyd, if you had fired Jeff Fisher, who would you have hired? And, with Floyd, if I'd asked him out on the radio, he would have sidestepped it. He would have never. But every now and then you'd ask him a question like that, he'd give you an answer. And he was looking out the window, and he said, well, I guess I probably would have hired Nick, i.e. Nick Saban. And the feeling that I had when he said that was I had considered it at the time. And considering that Nick and Floyd had worked together and were good friends and had mutual respect, that was not a shock. By the way, you're going to say, well, Nick Saban was no good with the Dolphins. Right, when Nick Saban was in charge of the organization. But if Floyd Reese was picking the players and Nick Saban was coaching them, I'd like to take my chances with an NFL team with Nick Saban. And so I'm not saying that Floyd would have done what Sam Presti did, which is he built a team that was good enough to win the title. Again, if you get to the NBA Finals and if you get to Game 7 where you're right there against Golden State, you're good enough to win the finals if the ball, as Rand Carthon would say, bounces your way. The Titans were good enough to win the Super Bowl. They lost the first one by a yard. The second one was just a complete and total abomination of a playoff game against the Ravens at home. I thought they could have won it in 2002 as well. Fumbles by Robert Holcomb and John Simon really doomed them there. Drew Bennett dropped the ball in 2003. Again, the bounce of the ball, where the margins actually are tiny. I'm not saying Floyd would have won the Super Bowl. if given the opportunity to rebuild the Titans, the same way that Sam Presti was given the opportunity to rebuild the Thunder. But it should be noted, Floyd got fired after 2006. In 2008, the Titans were 13-3 and had the number 1 record in the AFC, with guys making the Pro Bowl and were all pros that he had signed, like Kyle Vanden Bosch and Kevin Mawai and Chris Hope and Kerry Collins. And guys he drafted, like Albert Hainsworth and Keith Bullock and Cortland Finnegan. They had the best team in the NFL that year. And again, Jeff Fisher couldn't get him over the top. But I look back at what happened with Floyd, and I always keep thinking, what could have been? And this is coming from somebody who, even before I knew Floyd, I remember being a junior in high school in the kitchen of our old house, talking to my dad about, I don't like getting rid of Floyd Reese, because I felt like, as fans, we kind of felt there was tension between he and Jeff Fisher. And it was like, I think that tension was good. And now they're going to hire some yes man to Fisher. And that's exactly what happened. And that's why you can't win the Super Bowl. You had a general manager that built your team from the worst team in the NFL into AFC championship game and 2 division titles and headed for a third and won 61% of his games. And you didn't let him build it back up. Fired him less than a year after being the number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs. Fired him. There's a reason why this team has never won a Super Bowl. And there's a reason why OKC did yesterday. Because their owner went all in on Sam Presti. He rewarded him once. The owner realized this guy did not forget how to evaluate players. They blew it up. They loaded up on draft picks. They traded for SGA. And congratulations to Sam Presti, who will one day go up to Massachusetts and be inducted into the Naismith Hall of Fame. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. And there's one other element to this that I do wonder. Does what Sam Presti did, does this change your opinion on something that I feel like a lot of you really don't like when it comes to the NFL? We'll hit on that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game.
this has been a process, like 5-6 years to get to this point. Remember Chet Holmgren, as soon as they got him, he got hurt in that summer All-Star game that he was playing in. He's had a hip injury. He's obviously injury prone here, but you're getting guys and you're going, okay, nobody wants Alex Caruso. We'll take him. Lou Dort. Who? Jalen Williams. Who? I mean, come on. Guy went to Santa Clara. That's where you look at scouting. That's where you look at what you do down in the lab. And that's what OKC has done a wonderful job. And it starts with Sam Presti.
There you go. That was Dan Patrick today talking about Sam Presti, the general manager. Again, I think he's punched his ticket to the Hall of Fame. So I just looking at OKC over the years. And OKC, after Kevin Durant left, and again, they went to 7 games, and it was a thriller between OKC and Golden State. But they went to 7 games and lost to Golden State, and then Durant jumped ship in what was, I think, one of the biggest loser moves in recent sports history by Durant going to Golden State. The next year with Russell Westbrook, they made the playoffs, lost in the first round. The next year, they lost in the playoffs. They had Paul George, they had Carmelo Anthony, but they lost in the first round of the playoffs. The next year, they lost in the first round of the playoffs. Then they lost in the first round of the playoffs, and then they blew it up. Goodbye, Billy Donovan. Goodbye, Russell Westbrook. Goodbye, all those guys. And we're starting over. No Russell Westbrook. No Carmelo Anthony. No Paul George. But they got a bunch of picks. They got SGA. They got a bunch of players to build around. Again, they've developed guys like Lou Dort. Didn't make the playoffs. Didn't make the playoffs the next year. Didn't make the playoffs the next year. 3 years of not making the playoffs. Then they got back. They lost last year in the conference semis to Dallas. And this year, they won the championship. And I remember during the year when it came to the Titans, and we were talking about a general manager search, and we were talking about firing the general manager, and I kept saying, I want one of these veteran, experienced GMs that has done some winning. I want that guy to be the next general manager of the Titans. Why? Because Amy Adams Strunk has no idea how to build a football team, and she has no idea how to evaluate whether or not somebody has the ability to build a football team. But if you take a guy like Thomas Dimitrov, or you take a guy like Rick Spielman, who has built up a football team before, I know they can do it because they've already done it. And everybody was like, I don't know, Jared, Rick Spielman in Minnesota, they didn't win the Super Bowl. They only got to the NFC title game. He only drafted Justin Jefferson and Christian Darrisaw. I don't know if that's good enough for me. And I would say, you people are so stupid when you talk like that. But I think that's really how the NFL, the owners work too. And what'd you go do? You hired some guy from the Chiefs. Who knows if he's any good? I have no idea. You interviewed Thomas Dimitrov. He didn't even get a second interview. This is a guy who built up the Atlanta Falcons to where they had a 25-point lead in the Super Bowl. Again, the general manager can't win the game for you, but he can build a great team. And Dimitrov built a great team in Atlanta. He didn't get lucky. He was the GM there for like a decade. Went to 2 NFC title games. And yet, the fans and the owners of that league, they do not like hiring guys that have had a little bit of success. Do you think the Indianapolis Colts regret hiring Bill Polian after he didn't win the Super Bowl in Buffalo? They only went to 4. After he didn't win the Super Bowl in Carolina, they only went to an NFC title game as an expansion team. No, I don't think they do. Which, again, I'm not putting this on you people the way I put a lot of things on you people, because it's these moron owners. I mean, look at Jacksonville. Jacksonville went out and hired a 12-year-old to be their general manager who makes a stupid trade on draft night and then sounds like a freaking bozo at the press conference. Would Sam Presti have ever done that? This is what I'm talking about. You knew Sam Presti could build up a basketball team because he had already done it. And even though they didn't win the championship, and even though they had tried to rebuild around Westbrook and they got knocked out of the first round of the playoffs every time, it wasn't as if this guy didn't know how to evaluate talent and didn't know how to run a team. And here they are on the parade route today. When is Jacksonville going to go on theirs? You've been a franchise now for damn near 65 years. You've never won a Super Bowl. Why? Because you keep hiring Ran Carthon. No. No need for a general manager with experience and success. We don't want that. And look, every general manager is going to have a hiccup along the way. It's a tough job. It's like when it comes to John Robinson, I do not understand why NFL teams, and I feel the same way about Stillman, although he's now a senior advisor with the Jets. I feel the same way about Dimitrov. I'm like, why do NFL teams think that this 12-year-old for Jacksonville from the Rams is going to be a slam dunk better than the guy that won 61% of his games in Tennessee? Well, Jared, he traded A.J. Brown. Right, and guess what? When faced with it next time, he's probably not going to do that. Again, I asked Floyd one time, I said, what lessons do you think you learned from the Patriots? And he listed them off. And yet he never got another shot. John Dorsey, in the last decade, has been the general manager of a team that has drafted quarterbacks in the first round. Granted, I think it was an Andy Reid pick in 2017, but he was the GM. Baker Mayfield the next year. I think Baker Mayfield's pretty good. John Dorsey is an advisor for the Detroit Lions. I think they're doing things pretty well. But instead, everybody just wants that guy from the Chiefs because they convinced themselves that he's the reason that they ended up winning 3 Super Bowls. So they're just like, oh, he's the guy. When again, Amy and Burke Nihill and Chad Brinker have no way of knowing what in the hell he did for the Chiefs and what in the hell he didn't do for the Chiefs. Just like they had no idea what Ran Carthon did for the 49ers, which apparently seems like nothing. Because when Ran Carthon got here, you want to know what he did? Nothing. But I guess if you don't win the title right away, you suck. And even though OKC's guy's now been there, again, his first pick was Kevin Durant. He was the general manager of the Supersonics at 29 years old. But I guess he sucked until yesterday. One texter into the text line's all worked up. He said, we have a way better chance at a Super Bowl if we can flush the last bit of poop and let Mike Borgonzi do his thing. And then highlights that the last bit of poop he was referring to was Chad Brinker. Again, Brinker hired Borgonzi. So if you think Brinker's so good, then you have to, or if you think Borgonzi's so good, then you have to give Brinker his credit. I'm not the biggest Brinker guy in the world, but we shall see. I mean, I think Brinker is a symptom of what I don't like about all this, which again is that Amy doesn't have a clue. Doesn't have a clue. One text says, John Robinson never knew how to evaluate players. He got lucky early, then everything after that was pitiful. His decisions about coaches were terrible as well. Well, again, I'm going to push back on this. And then you people are going to say, you just have your mouth on John Robinson's cojones. And I'm going to say, so by saying that, hey, in his first draft, he drafted 3 All-Pros, which is a fact, I'm taking up for him. Derrick Henry is going to go to the Hall of Fame. And he drafted him. So he got lucky on Conklin, with whom he traded up to draft. He got lucky with Conklin, Henry, and Byard. And he got lucky with Simmons and A.J. Brown and Nate Davis and Amani Hooker and Jonnu Smith. He got lucky with all those guys. That's what you're telling me. And you're also telling me that his decision about coaches were, you're telling me that Mike Vrabel, the great Mike Vrabel, you're telling me that was a bad decision when everybody around the country takes their pants off when they talk about the Patriots because of the great Mike Vrabel. Now, I'll say this. I thought that was a risky decision, and I think it was a bad decision to move off of Mularkey. I thought it was completely unfair, and I thought Mularkey was a good coach, and I just don't believe in firing good coaches when you have them. But it's not like he went out there and hired Brian Callahan, who, again, I don't know if you can hold a single person in that building accountable. You people. Again, you people probably would have fired Sam Presti. Well, he went out and added Paul George. He sucks. Instead of giving him the opportunity that he earned by building it up the first time at OKC and letting him do it again. Howie Roseman built it up the first time. Now the Chip Kelly thing was a little bit, and then they let him build it up again. I mean, it's a joke. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. 615-737-1025 if you want to weigh in here on the program. Mike from PA says can't use Henry for J-Rob. He picked someone else ahead of him in the second round, someone who was a massive bust and had to be talked into Henry. He actually took two players ahead of taking Derrick Henry. But I guess by that logic, nobody gets credit for Tom Brady either because they picked 5 players before him. That's not how this works. You get credit for the guys you pick, and you get blamed for the guys you pick that don't work out. I mean, from what I was told, and I don't give John Robinson this kind of credit. I don't. From what I was told was Vrabel and Arthur Smith loved Isaiah Wilson, and they picked him. But I hold that against Robinson because at the end of the day, he was the general manager. It's as simple as that. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number. Speaking about Callahan, there was something that went down on Friday when I was off that just set me off. And we'll get to it next. And it's not about what happened as much as it is to me what it represents. We'll get to that next. I'm going to Company 1025, 106 the game.
Potential grand jury indictment hanging over his head. It would seem that would be something that would affect the guy coming to work. What have you seen from him, and how does that have a bearing?
The things about Legarius is that when he's here and working, he's fantastic. He's all the things that we hope he would be. Certainly when guys have off-field issues, he's not the first one. He won't be the last. There's a lot of guys that have things going on outside of the building that maybe aren't into public knowledge, or they're dealing with things with their families. There's a lot of things that happen that just like all of us, you have to separate your personal life and your work life, and be able to come to work and focus on the task at hand. I think he's done a good job of that. Certainly anytime you have distractions off the field, you prefer not to have those. But he's done a good job of handling it and keeping, the work here the main thing, and dealing with the things off the field when he has to deal with them. But I would say that's not unique to anybody in particular. I think that happens to a lot more guys than people realize. Again, maybe not necessarily civil cases or court cases, but just life in general. It can be hard to separate sometimes, and I think he's done a good job of it.
Well, Jarius Sneed's done a great job, other than the fact that, he got into an alleged shooting of a car dealership during the season last year. But outside of that, he's great. He doesn't play in any of the games, doesn't practice. But other than that, he's great. Brian Callahan ball, baby. So I saw a deleted tweet on Friday, and I'm telling you, this set me off. And I was going to fire off a tweet about this on Friday, but I decided, you know what? I'm going to save it for the show. Did you guys happen to see Jarvis Brownlee Jr.'s deleted tweet? So one of these football aggregators put out a video of Anthony Richardson rapping. I have no idea when Anthony Richardson filmed this. It's a bad look for Richardson. Let me say that. But Anthony Richardson, I guess, is a rapper, which again is embarrassing. And Jarvis Brownlee sent out a tweet, Indy on the clock for that BS. And then he would later delete it. And I saw that, and I could not believe the stones on Jarvis Brownlee Jr. And I'm not mad at Jarvis Brownlee Jr. By all accounts, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. is a good man. I've talked to a lot of people at Louisville that when he played there, they have nothing but good things to say about Jarvis Brownlee Jr. But where does Jarvis Brownlee Jr. get this idea that he can talk the talk? Jarvis Brownlee Jr. has never beaten Anthony Richardson. He's 0-1 against him. And the Titans are 0-4 against the Colts since Anthony Richardson was drafted. Indy on the clock for that BS. Ha, ha, ha. You told them. By the way, Jarvis Brownlee's PFF grade, it's not exactly like he was Deion Sanders out there. He was 59.4, which was good for 131st out of qualifying corners last year. So maybe Jarvis Brownlee Jr. should worry about Jarvis Brownlee Jr. and not worry about Anthony Richardson. But this isn't about Brownlee and what Brownlee did, because that is a symptom. My problem is the cause. To me, this speaks to the biggest bone that I have to pick with the Titans and their culture, which is led by Jeffrey, I've always got an excuse Simmons, that you can be on the worst team and you can have the worst stats and you can still talk all day, because results apparently don't actually matter around here. You don't have to earn the right to be able to talk on the Tennessee Titans. You just have to show up. And if anybody questions your credentials to be able to criticize others, well, I hate to say it, but you're just a hater. Because everybody that you'll encounter around that facility will act like you're a good football player. They'll kiss your ass. They'll tell you how great you are. They'll film a 6-part docuseries about you. And they'll ignore everything negative surrounding you and your football team. And there's nobody over there that apparently can look at this team and say, hey, boys, you're the worst team in football. Maybe you guys should shut the hell up and worry about yourselves. Maybe you should worry about completing passes and not about documentaries. Maybe you should worry about beating a double team instead of trying to go to the media to explain how they work. But that's not what happens when it comes to Brian Callahan's Tennessee Titans. And this all goes back to my biggest criticism of Callahan. And that is, I don't believe that when it is warranted, that he can put a foot up somebody's ass. And I don't think he's going to put a foot up somebody's ass. And when the coach won't do that, again, we can call it however we want to, hold people accountable. When the coach won't do that, it allows losing to be okay. It allows passing the buck to be okay, which is happening way too much around here. Last year, Denard Wilson got up there and with a straight face told people that when we start heating up, Arden Key'll start heating up. Which led Paul to ask Denard Wilson, isn't Arden supposed to be one of the guys that gets this team to heat up? And with a straight face, Denard Wilson said he will. And he did not. This team has a terrible culture. This coach, and I hope he proves me wrong, I really do. But I am afraid that he does not have the stones to be a head coach in the National Football League. I'm being honest. I think he's soft. And I think he lets the players over there get away with whatever they want to. And I think he patronizes the players. And I think he patronizes the coaching staff. And I just think these guys think that they're, almost said a word I should have said, that their poop doesn't smell. And it's all because Brian Callahan won't sit down with them and explain to them that it does. Everything there is done the nice way. Instead of telling somebody, hey, if you don't do this right, you won't play, we give guys chance after chance after chance after chance. I bet Brian Callahan broke down in tears when they decided to fire Colt Anderson. Because the way you'd listen to Brian Callahan talk about Colt Anderson, it was as if he was a great coach last year. Even though we've seen the special teams and we were accustomed to horrible special teams because we saw it under Craig Aukerman, but we saw the special teams sink to levels that I've never seen before last year. But again, Callahan can't stick his foot up anybody's ass. He won't do it. He cannot do it. He's too nice. This is the NFL. This is not daycare. And when I see Jarvis Brownlee Jr., again, the 131st corner in the National Football League, talking smack about another player in the division, another team in the division, a team that they did not beat last year, and they have not beaten in some time. I think to myself, only on the Titans, where Brian Callahan never says a bad thing about anybody, never tells anybody something they don't want to hear, where Jeffrey Simmons, somebody in the text line said this last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was with the minicamp stuff. It's like these coaches, they talk about Jeffrey Simmons like they work for him. I mean, Denard Wilson patronizes Simmons. Callahan patronizes Simmons. Tracy Rocker patronizes Simmons. Simmons didn't show up at all. And they're like, oh, no. Even though he's not here, he's here. What the hell does that mean? They're all a bunch of losers. And they're led by the chief loser, Callahan. And I wasn't going to say that. I mean, you know me. I've really been disappointed with Brian Callahan's lack of holding people accountable over the last 18, 20 months. But I think the Jarvis Brownlee thing, who the hell is Jarvis Brownlee Jr.? I think the Jarvis Brownlee Jr. thing was the thing that finally pushed me over the edge. Callahan's a loser. And as much as I'm rooting for him, the more it's hard not to smell the coffee that this guy cannot build a winning culture because he doesn't know the first thing about a winning culture. And I think that's because he's just not a winner. I hope he proves me wrong, but I think I've seen enough. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025 here on Stillman and Company. We'll get to your phones on this. Plus, there's another thing I do want to say about this Anthony Richardson thing. Again, the rapping video, just so it's not like, Jared, you love Richardson. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company, before we get to your phones, I do want to say, as I went off on Jarvis Brownlee Jr., talking trash about Anthony Richardson's rap video. I did see the Anthony Richardson rap video. Many of you tweeted it to me. I did not listen to it because I do not care. Let me say this, though. As an Anthony Richardson supporter, though I do think he's going to end up being a bust, and I think Indy's partly responsible, I don't like it. I don't need to see Anthony Richardson get a back tattoo. I don't need to see Anthony Richardson. If you care so much about rapping and tattoos, then go do that. Don't play football. If he was quarterback of the Titans, I'd go nuts. And I'm not saying don't have hobbies outside of work. We all have hobbies outside of work. But your public persona needs to be about your public life. And when you're getting back tattoos that take all day and you have to be put under, and you're putting out rap videos, it makes you look like you're not paying attention to your job. And I don't think quarterbacks can lead like that. I don't know what CJ Stroud's hobbies are, and I don't care. Let me just say this. Titan fans can't exactly have it both ways. You can't make fun of Richardson, whom you've never beaten, by the way, and then get mad at me for bringing up Cam Ward's docuseries. In both cases, it seems like somebody who's more focused on attention than they are football. And before you get mad at me about the fact that Cam Ward's docuseries is about football, let me ask you this. When does Jaden Daniels' documentary come out? Oh, yeah, he didn't have one. Got it. Can't have it both ways. Billy is up next here on the program. Billy, thank you for calling. Thank you for waiting. You go ahead.
Hey, I'm tracking with you completely on the culture for the Titans. But I would like to offer a conspiracy theory, if I will. Everybody loves conspiracy theory, right?
Right program for it.
Okay. So, it's well documented Nashville is a destination city for a lot of football fans for opposing teams because of the hospitality, the relatively low prices. There's a pretty good chance you're going to win when you come here. So why go to a really good team and spend your one trip a year going to them when you can come to Nashville and then pretty much have a more than 50-50 shot of winning. But
Billy, if you're suggesting that the Titans hired Brian Callahan to lose on purpose so that visiting fans would come here?
No. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that the owners of the team have enough other interests for hotels and bars and everything, and they really don't care if the Titans win because win, lose, or draw, that stadium's going to be full. It may be 3/4 full of the
If
opponents.
the Titans didn't care, and I appreciate your call, if the Titans didn't care about winning or losing, then why would they fire the general manager every 6 months? I mean, I get it. I want them to win too. I get it. I think the owner has done some really stupid stuff. I mean, really stupid stuff. I mean, dangerously incompetent stuff. But I don't think it's because they're not trying. I think it's because they don't know what they're doing. That's just me. Mike says, Callahan's response about L'Jarius Sneed was both outrageous and unacceptable. I don't understand how hard it is for Brian Callahan to say, when asked the question, can we get that cut again there, Reed, where Paul asks him about Sneed's focus, given the fact that he's got a potential grand jury indictment hanging over his head? And Callahan, who basically is like, all guys have issues in their personal life, but he's handled it great.
Potential grand jury indictment hanging over his head. It would seem that would be something that would affect the guy coming to work. What have you seen from him, and how does that have a bearing?
The things about L'Jarius is that when he's here and working, he's fantastic. He's all the things that we hope he would be. Certainly when guys have off-field issues, he's not the first one. He won't be the last. There's a lot of guys that have things going on outside of the building that maybe aren't into public knowledge, or they're dealing with things with their families.
All right, that's enough of that. Happen. Is it too difficult to ask, Callahan to at least say, like, hey, L'Jarius is dealing with his own personal stuff. We don't really talk about that as far as football's concerned, but we as a team want our guys to make the right decisions, and we're disappointed when guys don't. And for L'Jarius, we had high expectations when we acquired him, and I think he'd be the first to tell you that they haven't been met yet. But we're optimistic that they will be. How hard is it to at least just show a teensy bit of displeasure Vrabel did it with Stephon Diggs. Vrabel said after that video came out, we want our guys to make the right choices. And I had a talk with him because I talked to all the players. And we talk about making the right choices. And you could tell Vrabel wasn't happy about it. One texter says, I don't disagree with fearing that Callahan can't put a foot up someone's rear end, but I remember the famous clip of him yelling at Levis, what the F are you doing? Does that indicate that he's got a little bit of that in him? Well, I would say this. Number one, Brian Callahan had told Will Levis before the Chicago debacle, whatever you do, don't turn the ball over. And then Levis didn't listen to him. And then the next week on the first or second drive of the game, he rolls the ball on the ground. And that's what led to that outburst. And Callahan basically the next day regretted the fact that we all saw him get on Levis's ass because he doesn't want people to think that that's their relationship. And I'll never forget, John Glennon asked the question in the press conference about, do you now as a head coach have to be more aware of where the cameras are? And Callahan was like, yes. And I thought to myself sitting there, I'm like, he doesn't need to be more aware. I mean, he just go coach. And Paul asked, why do you have to be more aware? And you just tell a guy not to do something, don't do it. Well, I love Will hard and I coach him hard, but okay. The apology, it felt like, for that takes away from any of him just yelling at him on the sideline. And also, what did he do to Levis? Did he bench him? The next week, he threw a pick 6 against Green Bay. He bench him? He do anything? No, he got up there and told us all how great Jair Alexander was, even though the Titans had no interest in Jair Alexander, who was just a free agent last week. Not saying that they should have had interest in Jair Alexander. I'm just saying if he's as good as Callahan made him out to be after Levis threw him a touchdown last year, then maybe, you should have at least had a little interest. Greg in Clarksville says Callahan's done after this year. You won't have to worry about him. That is true. I mean, right now, I think I said it at like minus 300 last week that Callahan will not be the coach. Somebody said that was 72%. I feel pretty good about that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you want to weigh in. 615-737-1025. It is a big week for the Nashville Predators. Again, on Friday, they have the 5th pick in the draft. And this week is where you see a lot of movement as far as the NHL is concerned. And we're already starting to see a lot of it now. I do have a massive question, though, which we'll get to next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game National Studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. Tomorrow, it is expected that we will be live at Bridgestone Arena for our program. Why? Because Barry Trotz will join us at about 3:40-ish. And we got a lot of questions. And we got a lot of questions about the draft that's coming up on Friday night, where the Predators will have the 5th pick. They'll have the 23rd pick. They'll have the 26th pick. But also a lot of questions about, hey, the coach said he was going to go back and do a lot of thinking, even though I would have fired the coach. So what did the coach come up with? And and I think one of the big questions I have for Trotz as well is, how competitive does he expect the 2025-2026 Nashville Predators to be? But before I get to that with Barry Trotz, I do want to ask all of you this question, which is, how much do you care about the 2025-2026 Nashville Predators? And what do you want out of the 2025-2026 Nashville Predators? Because, quite frankly, when it comes to me, and I don't think I speak for everybody, and I don't even know if I speak for a majority or not. So this is why I'm going to ask the question. I don't really care about the 2025-2026 Predators until they drop the puck in October. And even then, I think I'm going to be more of the mindset of, okay, let's see if this team is actually improved. Like they said, after their 0-5 start, they could just never really get the train back on the tracks. Now that you start 0-0, let's see if you just improve off of that. The fact that, again, these guys have been in this system now for a year and they all know each other pretty well. The fact that Jonathan Marchessault came in and acted like an a-hole and, really pushed guys in a direction I thought they needed to go. But who knows? Let's see what effect that has on it. And then let's see if they can be competitive. Who knows? And then if they're not, for me, it'll be about the young guys and who of the young guys is going to be a part of the lineup when this team is good again. That's the way I look at it. And I hate it because, trust me, life on the radio is a lot more fun when you, as the host, are able to sit there and talk about big game tonight. And, oh, my God, they're second in the division and they're going to make the playoffs. And they just took down the defending cup champions and they blah, blah, blah. There was a game I remember in 2024 when they were on that heater where they played Colorado on a Saturday night. It was right before the trade deadline. And Vingan went to the game with me, and they took it to Colorado. And that was a lot of fun. And then they played Vegas, the defending cup champions, and they tied the game. I think they were down by 2 goals, maybe. I think they were down by 2 goals, and Vegas challenged when they scored to make it a 1-goal game, and Vegas lost the challenge, and the Predators scored again to tie it. And then Yossi scored this unbelievable wraparounder and over. That stuff is fun to be on the radio for. But again, big picture, what really matters? Like, if they make the playoffs this upcoming season, are they going to beat Edmonton? Are they going to beat Dallas? Are they going to beat Vegas? Are they going to beat Colorado? Are they going to beat Winnipeg? And so they were probably never going to beat those teams. They certainly, even though they went on that heater in 2024, they got to the playoffs. They lost in 6 games in a series in which they could have pulled out, but then they would have drawn Edmonton, and they weren't going to beat Connor freaking McDavid. They just weren't, and we all know it. So I'm really worried about the guys that will be there when they're going to get good again. And at some point, they will get good. But that's what I'm worried about. But again, I don't speak for this entire fan base. So this is my question for everybody. How much in the next week there are going to be guys that are going to be available for trades? There are going to be guys that request trades. There are going to be guys that won't waive their no movement clauses because of XYZ. You've already got a guy in Jonathan Marchessault who's made it abundantly clear, if you can trade me somewhere I want to go, I'll accept it. Which is really weak, by the way. Either you want out or you don't. But there's going to be some movement leading up to the draft on Friday night. And then on Friday night, you're on the clock. And that's what matters to me. Because I believe when it comes to the Predators, them being good again, not them making the playoffs and us having a nice season, but I'm talking about them being good, them having a team that can compete for the Stanley Cup. I believe that it's going to be predicated upon who they draft on Friday night. And I think that they've got enough young pieces that some of these guys will break through into the lineup and will be mainstays and staples. Like Svechkov, like LaRue, like Evangelista. Although Evangelista had a horrible season last year, but those kind of guys. And then Kimmel will be there, maybe a second-line center. A second-line winger. Edstrom will probably be their second-line center. Some of these guys will flame out. There'll be guys that don't have that kind of upside that find a way to grit their way through to the NHL level the way Victor Arvidsson did or the way that Craig Smith did. There's going to be some late-round gems over the last couple of years that are better than people expected, the way Matthias Ekholm was. That'll all happen. And there'll be moves that are made over the next couple of off seasons where they add this right shot defenseman at $7 million a year, but it'll be okay. But again, as far as are you going to compete for the cup? The way that Sidney Crosby's team used to compete for the cup. The way that Ovechkin's team used to compete for the cup. The way that Alexander Barkov, Matthew Tkachuk's team competes for the cup. The way that Connor McDavid's team competes for the cup. If you're going to do that, Nathan McKinnon, Austin Matthews, if you're going to do that, you have to hit this out of the park on Friday night. That's what matters. Not what happens about, they worked out a trade, so they were able to add a right shot defenseman, and they gave up a second rounder, and that stuff doesn't matter because, again, even if you get the good right shot defense, and so now Rasmus Anderson in Calgary or Noah Dobson in New York is playing on the first pair with Roman Josi, which they desperately need a veteran right shot to pair with Josi. That is, if Yossi's healthy enough to play hockey again, which I am concerned about, and we'll talk to Trotz about tomorrow. But if that is the case, again, you're not going to beat Edmonton because you added that. The only way that you're going to compete for the cup is if you draft a freaking superstar with the 5th overall pick. That's it. And yet, this morning, I was listening to Robbie. He's like, Preds fans, 615-737-1025. What do you want to see out of your team? I'll get to the draft later. And I'm like, I just, either way, whatever happens this upcoming season, it doesn't, if they play well, which I do think is possible. I don't think it's likely, but I do think it is possible that last year they started off 0-5, and even though they got to 3-5, they never really could get ahead of it. And then they had that road trip where they went to Washington and they got killed, and they went to Florida and they got killed around Thanksgiving. And then they got their asses kicked in Canada at one point. Like, as all that went down, it just kind of felt like, maybe if they had started off differently, it would have been a different season. So maybe they'll be good next year because that'll all have happened and they will all be really jazzed up for the start of the season and really, taking it seriously, and they'll take training camp and the coach hasn't lost the room. And so maybe that happens. I don't know. Again, I doubt it. But even if that does happen with Stamkos and Marchessault and Brady Shea and Josi returning from injury, and UC Saros doesn't look like this complete and total pumpkin that he was last year, even if that happens, you're not beating Connor McDavid. You're just not. You're not beating any of those teams. Colorado, Vegas, Dallas. So, again, what happens next year, it doesn't matter to me. Who they draft, and then that guy becoming a stud, that is what matters. It's a lot like the Titans. How much do you care about the difference between 7, 8, or 9 wins? And how much do you care about whether or not Cam Ward looks like a stud? Though I do think those two things go hand in hand. The Predators may draft somebody who doesn't even play for the Predators next year. But again, I'm asking you, because I'm telling you, I don't care that much. I am worried about the future. I am worried about the young guys. I am worried about who they draft Friday night. Because if they miss on Friday night, It's going to be a long, long, long time before they ever compete for the Stanley Cup. If they nail it, 3-4 years, could be competing again for the Cup. 615-737-1025 is the phone number, 615-737-1025. So we will have Barry Trotz in the program tomorrow, and I'm going to ask Barry specifically about the guys that they may pick at number 5. My guess is Barry knows exactly, okay, if, and let's take Schaefer and Misa out of this because they're going to go 1-2. But if Chicago takes this guy and Utah takes that guy, we're taking this guy. And I think he probably knows that in every scenario. This is how I'd rank them with the limited knowledge I have. We'll get to that coming up next. 615-737-1025, Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 through the game.
Why do you think Hagen's stock has dropped a little bit? Because I think for a while I was seeing him more in that top tier.
Yeah, there's a mix of factors. Part of it is just that he didn't have a great season in college hockey, and we've seen some great seasons by draft eligible players in the last couple of years, and I think that skewed what the expectations might have been for a player like James Hagens. We saw Macklin Celebrini and Adam Fantilli put up 60-plus points in college hockey. James Hagens had 37 and 37, was still a top player on his team, a top 6 player on Boston College, who were one of the best teams in the country this year, led the American World Junior team in ice time by forwards to win a gold medal, was very good at the World Juniors in that role, scored a couple of big goals at the World Juniors, including a pivotal wraparound goal that he stuffed. Is the reigning and current record holder for most points at U18 Worlds, which he set a full year ago in Finland. A year before that, he set the U17 world scoring record. So we're still talking about a high-end player, but there were some games this year where he just didn't dominate, where he blended in a little bit more than a Macklin Celebrini did or an Adam Fantilli did when they played in college at the same age. Especially games against bigger opponents. I remember a weekend series coming out of the World Juniors against Merrimack College, a really heavy, big team in college hockey, where he just struggled to get to the inside, and that raised some questions with teams about all of the talent in the world, all of the skating in the world, but is he going to be able to score a ton and get to the net and get to the dirty areas a ton in the NHL as a 5'10.5", 5'11" center?
There you go. That was Scott Wheeler, the Athletics draft analyst, who will be on DVD on Wednesday. That was him on DVD about a month ago. So there's this big story about James Higgins, again, is worth watching, and why this guy keeps falling as far as the NHL draft guide people are considered. Which, again, I don't say that, it's nothing. That's just bull crap. They're just, is it just the people out there are just doing this and they don't really know? And I don't do this because we did that with Shedeur Sanders. Well, why is he falling? It sounds like he's falling, but you'll see he's not falling. And then Shedeur Sanders fell to the 5th round. So keep that in mind. Before the start of the year, James Higgins was considered by some to be the number 1 prospect heading into the draft. And you heard in that cut from Scott Wheeler, he basically said teams thought that when he got to Boston College last year, he didn't play as well as he was supposed to. Michael Misa played better than they thought he was going to play. Matthew Schaefer played better than they thought he was going to play. And so I get that. And so right now, and I don't know enough about this stuff. Again, I'm not going to watch this tape, so it's going to be kind of formulating opinions from all these different people that I trust that would know what they're talking about. But as of right now, and here's the list of players I think the Predators are going to have a shot at. I do believe that the first 2 picks, Misa and Schaefer, are off the board. If you're one of these people that says, I think the Predators should trade the 2 other first-round picks they have and move up to number 2 and take Michael Misa, I don't think it's going to work out that way. I don't think that they would take that deal. San Jose. So I think they're taking Misa, and I think Schaefer is going to the Islanders at 1. Now, the rest of it is very fascinating because some of these rankings have James Higgins around 8 or 9, and some of these rankings have him as number 3. But I believe the Predators will have their choice of at least one of the following: James Higgins, Brady Martin, Porter Martone, Anton Friedel, Jake O'Brien, Roger McQueen, and Caleb Denoyer. And it sounds as if all these guys kind of have different things that they highlight. For instance, Porter Martone is a goal-scoring 6'2" winger. The problem is he's a winger, not a center. It sounds like Brady Martin is this really competitive, really tough center who's about 6'6'1", but he's not really a great skill player from what they say. It sounds like this Caleb Denoyer, that he's kind of more of a fast riser lately, but he's kind of more of your typical 2-way type center, but without kind of elite traits. Higgins has elite skill, but he kind of disappointed last year, and he's only 5'11". Really probably more like 5'10". So here's how I'd rank them right now, and I want the total ability to be able to change this throughout the week. For when we get to Friday, I feel like I'll have a lot more information. Number 1, Higgins. Even though he's not the biggest, and all these other guys are bigger than him, McQueen is 6'5", and they may be taking him. I still think at the end of the day, Higgins was probably a little too young for the Boston College, was too young to go out there right away and just light up at Boston College. He plays next to another guy that's in your system right now, Teddy Stiga, who I think the Predators view as a very big part of the solution. And I can't get over the fact that this time last year, Bob McKenzie thought he was the best player in this draft. And he's a center, and he's definitely a center, and he's American, which matters to the Predators. And while I didn't like the goal scoring last year, I was told all year there are 3 guys in this draft, 3 guys in this draft, 3 guys in this draft, and he's one of them. So he's number 1. Number 2 is Denoye. It sounds like he's the most complete of all of the centers that would be available. In fact, I expect Chicago will probably take Denoye at number 3. Number 3, Brady Martin. Why? Because apparently Brady Martin is as competitive and as tough as they come. Supposedly he's a lot like Sam Bennett. But again, it took Sam Bennett a long time to become Sam Bennett in the NHL. But he's that kind of tough, really gritty two-way center. And so I have him at 3 and then Martone at 4. I wish he was a center, but I mean, dude scores. And if you can score, we will find you a center. It'll take us some time, but we'll find you one. So right now, Hagen's 1, Denoye 2, Martin 3, Martone 4. Now, it sounds like the best upside of the group may be Roger McQueen. Again, he's 6'5". And coming into the year, he was considered to be one of the top prospects as well, but he didn't do much last year because he had a back injury. And Tim Hasselbeck said this, and I have never forgotten it, in which he said, have you ever met somebody that used to have a bad back? And the answer is no. Because once you have a bad back, chances are that bad back ain't going away. So if you got a bad back at 17 years old, no thank you. That's it. I wish that I reserve the right to change my mind, and I wish that Hagens was 6'2". But if Hagens was 6'2", then he wouldn't be available at number 5. And you can win with a 5'10" center in the NHL. So that's the ranking as of now. 615-737-1025. And our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Again, I said, what do you want out of the 25-26 Predators? Do you want the playoffs? Skylar says, I want the Predators to go younger. After this past year, I could see another year like it next year, but bring in younger guys to take over for the next 2 to 3 years. No more old pawpaws. So there is something that and I'm not putting this on Robbie Stanley because a lot of people said this, but it really stuck into my brain in 2023. And that was when the Titans were bad, Robbie Stanley kept saying, hey, you got to put Levis in there because you got to see what you have. And I just don't believe that. I just don't believe that. I believe that the team sees practice and they can see what they have. I understand the idea of the fans. Hey, if we're going to be bad, let's put the young quarterback out there so at least we'll see if he's any good. But I'm worried that when you do that, you risk ruining the young quarterback that you have. I know people don't have a lot of patience. And I know people, as soon as you take that tray of cookies out of the oven, you grab them, even though you know as well as I do, let them sit. When Barry Trotz got the job, he went on the midday show. And at the midday show, he said, we're not going to microwave these players and we're going to cook them in the minors. And even though I look at the Dallas Stars and how aggressively they promote Logan Stankoven and Wyatt Johnston and those kind of, and I'm like, where the hell are these guys? I am aware that it takes time in the NHL. I'm not rushing some kid up from Milwaukee if you don't think he's ready. I'm not doing it. I understand no more old pawpaws. But I'm not just going to bring up Joakim Kimmel if Joakim Kimmel ain't ready. I am not going to screw up a guy's development when I know I'm not competing for the cup. I am not going to screw up a guy's development just to appease the fans' ability to watch that guy play instead of some Scarbini-ish type player like Cole Smith. I don't want to watch Cole Smith play anymore, but I will if it's in the best interest of James Hagens that I watch Cole Smith play next season. 615-737-1025. More of your phones. 615-737-1025. Stillman & Company. 1025, 106 for the game.
when it comes to Misa and Higgins, it's the tale of opposite seasons. So Misa came in, and his development curve went in the right direction for the most part. He dipped a bit in the playoffs again. For the most part, it went in the right direction. And he blew everybody out of the water with his production and showcased what his skill set would really look like and translate correctly. James Higgins went to college. You know, he did very well in the USHL, as you know. U18s, he dominated. He goes to college. And quite frankly, he had a very average season. Very average from most metrics. He didn't produce as much as expected. I thought his curve was incredibly flat. I don't think he got better as a prospect at all over the course of the season. So the question is why? What happened? How do we parse this? How do we strip this down? What can we do about it? Where do we rank? So with Higgins, the first thing I looked at was the fact that he wasn't scoring at the rate that was expected. And then a young kid, what's going to happen, Shane? He's going to grip his stick too tight. He's going to start overshooting pucks on bad angles. He's going to start forcing the play. I felt that's exactly what happened. I thought he was better in the semis and the gold medal game. And the reason I bring up the gold medal performance is because the single biggest weakness of what this player showcased this season, he at least displayed some competence in, and that is being able to attack net front.
There you go. That was, make sure I get this right. That was Brad Allen, who is, I guess, a draft analyst, hockey. That was the Sirius XM NHL draft preview show where they talked about the difference between Misa and Higgins. By all accounts, it sounds like Higgins had a bad year and had a bad, World Juniors. But then at the end of the World Juniors, kind of took over the way that you'd like him to take over if you wanted to pick him. Now, Teddy Stiga, who is a Predators prospect, a second-round pick last year by the Predators, had the golden goal in the World Juniors, and those guys do play together at Boston College. I don't know if that matters or if it doesn't matter. That I couldn't tell you. Let's get to the phones, as promised. 615-737-1025 with our phones here on the program. Again, Barry Trotz will be here tomorrow. On the program, we will have Barry Trotz at 3:40. So Barry Trotz will join us on the program. And apparently, Barry Trotz, they just announced it's going to have his media availability at 3 o'clock. So, Reed, here's what I think we do tomorrow. This is just my opinion. We run Barry Trotz live at 3 o'clock, and we take notes of what he says so that we don't have to ask questions that he's already answered. We already know what Barry Trotz is going to say to those people. So when they ask him questions about the direction of the team or whatever, we don't have to re-ask it, but then we can go deeper on some of the things that he says. What do you think of that? Or do you think we should just ask our own questions?
I mean, do you, not to disparage anyone else in the media, but do you think they're going to ask questions to the caliber of what you're trying to get at for this team ahead of the draft?
Well, I do think it's easier in a one-on-one setting to ask those kind of questions than it is at a press conference. Not only that, everybody at that press conference has their own agenda. So when it comes to the TV people, they're going to ask a question like, Barry, how important is the 5th pick in terms of determining the future for the Predators? Because they've got a 1:30 long newscast, for sports. And they're just going to be like, Predators general manager Barry Trotz met with the media today to talk about the draft. And then they want to run, 10 seconds of Barry being like, well, it's a very important pick if we make it the right way, whatever. Whereas I'm sitting here trying to, how long of a leash does this coach have? In all seriousness, are you going to fire him if you go start off 0-5 again? What about the Marchessault stuff? But if they ask about Marchessault and these trade request rumors and he answers it, then that's something that comes off of my plate. And then I don't have to ask him because we already know. And on some of these things with Barry, he talks so much that there may be something he says in the press conference that I circle and highlight and say, whoa, dude, what's that mean? So I'm not disparaging the media either. I'm just saying I just think it's a little different. One texter in the text line says, top 6 center or things go the same as they did last year, Steven Stamkos has to be on the wing. So before I knew anything about this draft, what I believed was if you stunk bad enough to get one of the top picks, this was before Misa had separated from Higgins, I was of the belief, draft James Higgins, stick him on the second line with Stamkos, and on you go. Now, it does seem to me that if the Predators draft Higgins, there's probably a pretty good chance he goes back to BC. And he and Stiga would play together on that top line at BC. And then once BC gets knocked out of the NCAA tournament, then the Predators would probably sign Higgins to an entry-level contract. And if the Predators stink, they'll probably start him right away in Nashville and then probably send him down to Milwaukee for the playoffs like they've done with some other guys in the past, just because if they draft James Higgins number 5 overall and they sign him in March to a contract, they're going to get butts in the seats by saying, hey, come out and see the big debut. But I have thought about this, that if they draft Higgins and if Higgins signs an ELC, if you draft Higgins and he says, I'm ready, I'm going pro, I probably would start with Higgins on the second line. If you signed Michael, or if you drafted Michael Misa would be on the second line next year. And I'd have a first line of O'Reilly, Forsberg, and Marchessault, and a second line of Higgins, Stamkos, and Bunting. That's what I would do, for whatever that's worth. One texter says, we still think Trotz knows what a scoring center is. He only ruined David Legwand and Alexander Radulov. Yeah, I'd say that Matthew Barzal in New York and Alexander Ovechkin in Washington, and, I think, even a guy like Chandler Stevenson, I think you have to give Trotz some credit. Again, it'd be easy to say, like, oh, yeah, Barry Trotz, they couldn't score with the forwards here, but it's not like he ruined Ovechkin. I mean, the guy who just broke Wayne Gretzky's record played for Barry Trotz. So I have a hard time believing that one. One texter says, I could see this team being competitive if things click this year. I could see them being competitive. I know Stamkos, Marchessault, and Forsberg would be hard-pressed to hit 40 goals, but everyone last year had a down year, and I'd expect a rebound. I'd also expect SMF. Who's SMF? To each get 25 plus. I'm thinking that Stamkos, Marchessault, Forsberg. To each get 25 plus goals. If Evangelista, Bunting, and O'Reilly can get 20, this team could be good. That's a lot of if this happens, if that happens, if this happens, if that happens. And to me, that leads you to Cody Glass. So Adam Vingan and I have a little bit of a disagreement. Adam Vingan's all mad that the Predators traded for Eric Halla, and I get it, and I understand what the Predators' point is, that they think that Eric Halla on the bottom six, playing with Fedor Svechkov, playing with Zachary Leroux, those kind of guys will make them better. And that's their argument. I'm not the biggest believer in that argument, but that is what I think the Predators think. And Vingan's theory is the Predators need to be taking risks on guys like Trevor Zegras. They need to be taking risks on, guys that were either high picks and haven't worked out, or guys that have shown a little something, and for some reason their teams don't like them. I actually don't believe that's what the Predators should do in either instance. I think that would be the Predators trading for Kirby Dach, for instance, and saying, well, he was taken 3rd overall 7 years ago, so let's stick him out there. I don't believe in that. I think that's what Pittsburgh's trying to do by taking all of your players. Oh, we'll take Cody Glass. Oh, we'll take Tomasino. Oh, we'll take Novak. And then those guys aren't even really all that good anyways. Which, by the way, Kyle Dubas is the general manager in Pittsburgh. He was the general manager in Toronto. I don't see a Nashville tie there, but he's hired Dan Muse to be the coach. And last year he went out and got a bunch of Scarbinis from Nashville. I'm trying to figure out where the tie-in here is with Kyle Dubas and this weird obsession he has in Pittsburgh. But that's a different discussion. If you do that, I think that's kind of the Cody Glass route, which is, well, the guy was picked high and he hasn't popped yet, but he'll pop for us. That's not exactly what I'm looking for. Here's what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for as far as the NHL roster is concerned is I am looking for guys in which their team either doesn't want them anymore because they're a good player, but they've gone sideways with the coach, or their team doesn't want them because the guy's going to want a new contract, or you see, like, there's some sort of reason for a breakup. And so this team is looking to replace this player, or this team is looking for something. And then you take advantage of the situation. You buy low. Okay, well, you have to trade this guy, so we'll trade you a prospect that We don't really love internally, but we'll trade that or we'll trade a second-round pick for it. And then that way you don't have to sign some guy to a 7 or 8 year deal. Because that's what I'm trying to avoid. I'm trying to avoid 7 and 8 year contracts. I'm trying to avoid no movement clauses. I'm trying to avoid the things that I feel like I already have too much of. That's what I'm trying to avoid. Here's the other thing, which again, I know the Predators put out a statement last week about this saying, oh, it'll be okay. And this is where I'm like, this Roman Josi Potts diagnosis makes me very nervous. Because again, you read up on it and it's like, oh yeah, you get an irregular heartbeat and dizziness just from standing up. But Roman Josi says he'll be okay to compete at the NHL's highest level next year. I don't know about that one. Again, that makes me very, very nervous. Eric says, the sad thing is these guys aren't fully mature until they reach about age 25. So this is the thing I keep trying to hammer away at, that everybody loses their mind every time I bring this up. So I believe that Barry Trotz should be the Predators general manager unless he just does some really stupid stuff. You know, like putting Nicholas Petit-Frere at right tackle. Unless he just does some really stupid stuff, I think he should be the general manager until 2028. Again, the average for a GM in the NHL is 4.79 years, according to some stat Robbie Stanley got from The Athletic. And Barry Trotz took over in 2023. The texter is right. These guys don't mature. You don't know fully what these guys are or they aren't until they're about 25, 26 years old. Like, you just don't know. And as much as I want to know right away if they take Higgins or Martone or whomever right away, I also would say that I need to give that guy some time. Like, I want Tanner Molendyk to be on the top pair next year. Like, I want Josi to be healthy, knock on wood, and I want Molendyk to be on the top pair. But is it fair to ask a 22-year-old Tanner Molendyk to be on the top pair right away? And guys like McDavid, I mean, they're good, but you're not getting McDavid. But you are right. Like, you don't know how these guys are until they're about 24, 25, or whatever it may be. Ryan Ellis, for instance, was drafted in the first round in 2009, and he and Matthias Ekholm weren't very good together until about 2015. It takes time. But everybody who's a football fan thinks it's like football where you draft Cam Ward number 1 and you stick him out there, and he should be good by the first or second year. But Cam Ward's not 17. That's the difference. 615-737-1025. It is Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 the game. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Those are my guys. Hiller takes great care of my home. They can do the exact same for you. Have you ever called a plumber, an electrician, or an HVAC tech and felt like they were trying to sell you something you did not need? If a deal sounds too good to be true, like a $99 club membership or a $29 tune-up, that's because it is. The reality is they have to find something to fix so they can cover their costs for these discounted club memberships. Unlike the other guy, Hiller never offers deals designed to trick you or sell you something that you absolutely do not need. And so you hear me talking about my friends at Hiller all the time. But this is why I trust them, because they're not going to sell you something that you don't need. They are actually going to charge you what you do need and what you do need fixed. And these guys are experts. And I know because Hiller works on my home. And I've been over with them and said, okay, so what about this or what about that? And every time they do a job, I never have to call them back out. That's because they are good at what they do. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. My guys, proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. That's Hiller. Call the Happy Face Truck today.
Nembhard kicks it out. Toppin. Good contest from Dort. Halliburton falls down. He looks hurt. Here comes SGA the other way. Inside, and Williams throws it down. Halliburton's hurt right away when he fell. Of course, that strained calf. He's in pain, so emotional. It's the right calf right away. He knew he was in trouble. Oh, you get in a situation like this, you're just sick to your stomach for the young man. We'll take a timeout.
There you go. That was the moment that kind of ended the NBA last night. Tyrese Halliburton. It looked like it was going to be a shootout between SGA and Halliburton, and boom, Halliburton goes down with a torn Achilles. Now, who knows where they all go from here? I'm really bummed out, not so much that Indiana lost, because I was rooting for Indiana, and I was rooting specifically for Halliburton. I've become a big Halliburton fan. But I'm bummed out for the fact that now Halliburton's probably going to miss all of next year. So any positive momentum that they would have had as far as the Halliburton thing is concerned, it does kind of feel like that's over, which I don't like. So I saw a headline from Awful Announcing. Gilbert Arenas. Gilbert Arenas on what fans will remember from the 2025 NBA Finals. Quote, nothing. So I had to click on it. And I had to say, okay, what is this about? When asked on the Dan Patrick Show on Monday, Gilbert Arenas, who's now a podcaster, he does not believe there will be any long-lasting legacy from this year's championship. Quote, nothing. We won't remember it. Let's just be honest. When it comes to small market teams, we don't remember much about them. We don't really talk about the Toronto championship. We don't talk about the Bucks Giannis championship. And with this one, the only memorable thing was the Halliburton Game 1 winner. Other than that, there was nothing really in this finals that makes you say, oh my God, this was a great finals. I got to tell you, former players, when they say some stupid stuff, people will say, can you believe this former player said that? When I was on Sirius on Friday, somebody called in and they're like, did you hear what Gilbert Arenas and Tracy McGrady said on First Take today? And because I was preparing for that show, the answer was no. But I got to tell you, I don't care what Gilbert Arenas and Tracy McGrady think. But this idea that we're not going to remember anything from this finals, I think is crazy. Because I think this NBA finals has changed the way that we as sports fans look at the calf strain. That from this point forward, based on Durant and based on Tyrese Halliburton, the next time one of your team's players gets a calf strain, I don't think you're going to look through that and say, well, you know, maybe he can play in the game on Sunday. If Cam Ward's got a calf strain and he's questionable for the game, my advice would be don't play. Why? Because calf strain leads to Achilles. And now we all know it. So that's what I think we will remember about these NBA finals. But also, who really gives a rat's ass what Gilbert Arenas thinks? Get some better sourcing. That's it for us. We are out of here, Stillman and Company. We are live at Bridgestone Arena tomorrow. Barry Trotz will join us at 3:40-ish. So we look forward to that. Stillman and Company, we'll see everybody tomorrow too.